Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Dunbar.
Here.
Ms. Kennedy. I believe she asked to be excused. Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Ms. LaFrance. Is Ms. LaFrance excused until she arrives?
Yes, until she arrives.
Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Here.
Mr. Constant.
Here.
Ms. Allard. Mr. Perez Verdia.
Here.
Ms. Zalatel.
Here.
Mr. Weddleton. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
So when the red is on, it's on.
Mr. Gates, can you please lead us in the pledge?
Can you hear me? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Zalato, can you please read the land acknowledgement?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. A land acknowledgement is a formal statement recognizing the indigenous people of a place. It is a public gesture of appreciation for the past and present indigenous stewardship of the lands that we now occupy. It is an actionable statement that marks our collective movement towards decolonization and equity. The Anchorage Assembly would like to acknowledge that we gather today on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina Athabascans. For thousands of years, the Dena'ina have been and continue to be the stewards of this land. It is with gratefulness and respect that we recognize the contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspectives of the Upper Cook Inlet Dena'ina.
Thank you. Moving on to minutes of previous meetings. Madam Vice Chair?
Move to approve the minutes of regular meetings for February 25th, March 10th, March 12th, the special emergency meeting on March 12th, and the regular meeting of March 24th. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any opposition to the motion? Okay, seeing none, that motion passes. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have nothing to report other than what's going to occur at the meeting this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moving on to Assembly Chair's report. Couple things. So first is with an increase in cases of COVID-19 and relatively packed house today, for the safety of municipal staff, the Assembly, and the audience, it is important that we follow all the health protocols in place. So for these chambers, it means physical distancing and wearing your mask. Physical distancing sets a natural limit for how many individuals can be in the chambers at any one time. Wearing a mask is mandatory in the chambers. As we go through some procedural items as we start our meeting, I'm going to ask everyone to abide by the rules of this chamber. I'll come back to this issue if necessary throughout the meeting. And thank you to everyone for supporting and ensuring the safety of everyone in the chambers. A couple other things. So first, I want to really thank the IT office and the clerk's office for the new and improved sound system. It's part of a plan for upgrades in the Assembly chambers that have been going on for about 8 years or so. So thank you to everyone involved. We're going to be seeing more of these upgrades in the near future with the Evolution project continuing. And then last, as most members know, we have the meeting, all-day meeting on Friday to continue discussion of the CARES Act funding. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to committee and liaison reports. I'm going to go down the dais, starting on this side with Mr. Weddleton.
Thank you. Well, it's good to be back, everyone. Hello. Ms. Allard, nice to meet you. The Community Economic Development Committee reviewed a couple of marijuana licenses that we hope to see later on this evening, and we've got a few more coming up in a couple of weeks. We're also kind of revisiting the building fee changes that we did at the end of last year that applied all of this year. Some of the different trades, plumbing and roofing, have stumbled over those, so we're revisiting those. And we continue to work very actively on something that is real important today, and that is strict requirements for a conditional use for homeless shelters. And we've made a lot of progress on that, and these are so the shelters will function better, so they'll protect the neighborhood better, and so that the philosophy would be up and out and moving on to an independent life. We're also looking as part of that is perhaps having a special permit for a homeless shelter, so that would be something that, unlike a conditional use, we would have quick control over if things go bad. Thank you.
Ms. Zolotel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Committee on Homelessness will meet tomorrow from 11 a.m. until 12:30. It will be a virtual meeting, and we'll be taking up the alcohol tax, particularly in pillars 1, 2, and 4. So those are our partner pillars under the Anchored Home Plan. They'll be there to present their ideas and their requests on how we could spend the alcohol tax funds. We'll also be hearing from the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness around the gap analysis, and this gap analysis, which was recently published, will tell us, I won't spoil it, but it will tell us about our needs around homelessness services in Anchorage. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to note for the record, we've been joined by Ms. Kennedy on the phone. Mr. Perez-Verdia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a meeting of the Public Safety Committee on July 1st. At that meeting, we had a presentation from Chief Dahl on current policies and practices of APD and suggestions for new policy ideas. We also had a number of community leaders come forward and share their perspective about the state of policing in Anchorage, and shared a lot of very creative and important ideas about how we can continue to improve policing in Anchorage. We had a presentation from administration and also a presentation from Recover Alaska on some ideas and strategies that a number of organizations have come together to bring to the Assembly around use of the alcohol tax. That's my update. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Allard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did have on the 26th an audit committee meeting. We were addressing issues with the Anchorage Fire Department and looking to do a follow-up in the month of July. Not sure exactly when. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Constant.
Thank you. On Thursday, we will be having a meeting of the Enterprise and Utility Oversight Committee in which we will be discussing a number of items, including the Port Plan of Finance, the Port of Alaska User Group, maybe some more conversation about the stormwater utility. We'll see what happens tonight. And other than that, look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Budget and Finance Committee of the Whole will be meeting this Thursday, July 16, via Teams, and it'll be from 12:10 to 1:10. And I just wanted to point out that there's an item under Information Reports, the Monthly General Government Revenue Status Report to the Assembly, and that is an agenda item for Thursday as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Quinn-Davidson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually could not hear Ms. LaFrance. Did you give a Health Policy Committee update, Ms. LaFrance?
Did you do HPC? HPC? Health policy? No, she did not.
Okay, thank you. We met a couple weeks ago at the Health Policy Committee. We've been mostly focused on evaluating the alcohol tax funding and how to hopefully move toward a direction of appropriating some of that funding for prevention work. We heard from the director of Anchorage Health Department, who spoke about preparing a report that she'd be distributing to the mayor and to the Assembly that strives to us why racism is a public health crisis, and I'm really looking forward to receiving that report. And we'll meet the first Wednesday of August at the Health Policy Committee next, 10 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Ethics and Election Committee met on June 24th. We discussed tracking ballots and the estimated cost. And we also discussed the dates of runoff elections during mayoral elections. And we got an introduction to the resolution about a stamp as a thing of value that we have on, that's on our agenda tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nothing to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no committee report tonight, but with your permission, I'd like to ask a question of the mayor that I meant to during the report time.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. So for the mayor, or perhaps for the municipal manager, obviously we've seen a fairly rapid increase in the number of COVID-19 cases in the state and in Anchorage, and a number of health professionals have told us that masks are one of the best ways to prevent it. At our last meeting, or perhaps it was a meeting before that, we approved some money that was flexible for you, and I had asked if you could use it to try to distribute masks. That is, the municipality could try to facilitate getting more masks to the public. And I was wondering if you could give any update, perhaps for you, Mr. Falsey, on how those efforts are going.
I would be happy to, through the chair. I no longer have a microphone. I don't know if I should take that as a sign. We have been successfully able to distribute 23,000 masks over the last 2 weeks. We did not have to procure those masks. Those are masks we were able to source through a federal government partner. We also believe that the state now has a significant cache of additional cloth masks that we have requested a significant amount of, and we hope very much to get into the business of distributing those masks as well. So we are aligned in our thinking there, and do hope to be pushing out many more into the community.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. With that, we're going to go ahead and take a break for a few minutes. There's a technical issue with folks hearing on the phone that we're going to sort out. All right, if we can go ahead and take our seats, we're going to get started with the meeting again. Okay, the next item we have before us is item 11A, Information Memorandum number AIM 87-2020, Internal Audit Report 2020-06, Emergency Vehicle Preventative Maintenance, Anchorage Fire Department. Madam Clerk, do we have a motion on the floor? What is the will of the body? Thank you.
Move to accept.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on this item? Okay, seeing Mr. Weddleton.
I'm sorry, we're 11A. Let me back up to it a moment. You know, I guess to someone on the administration, the question here is kind of maintenance of fire vehicles. And I guess the firemen do the maintenance, it sounds like. I mean, don't we have fleet maintenance and professional mechanics who would do this work? Or would that be a better way to do this, is pull it away from the fire department?
It might have been Meg.
Through the chair to Assemblymember Weddleton, I'll ask the fire chief to respond. We do have mechanics who do this work. They are employed by the fire department, and they are specialty mechanics, but I'll let the fire chief give you the fuller story.
Okay. Jody Hetrick, Anchorage Fire Chief. Assembly Member Weddleton. The Anchorage Fire Department has our own specially trained mechanics. We have 8 mechanics who service all of our apparatus. The reason why it's not part of fleet is because it does require specialized training and equipment to do all of the maintenance on our emergency response apparatus. Our firefighters do not do that work.
Oh, that's reassuring. So I mean, obviously this is not a good audit here and things have slipped, and I almost like the idea that the firemen were doing it, because like if a solid waste services trash truck breaks down, it's not a crisis, but if a fire truck on the way to a fire does, we got a real problem. And the firemen would, of course, first in line for that. So, I mean, so this is being remedied, and tell us that this is all going to be better soon. Or reassure us.
Well, I would be happy to say that, yes, we can fix all of this, but we do have some systemic issues just with the funding of our maintenance shop and our department. We have, in past years, sacrificed a lot of things to keep operations going. The shop was one of the areas that's been sacrificed, and we have failed to maintain a good maintenance budget and staffing. As we grew the department and as we grew all of the apparatus that service the community, we failed to grow the shop. We do have a plan and a recommendation in place, and one of those is doing a much better job at cataloging the maintenance that does occur and get us on track to have a good preventive maintenance schedule. We had to do some personnel changes to do that, and we have made that happen. So we think we're in a better place, but it's my opinion, we're still under-resourced.
Okay, so I wonder, is this something at our Public Safety Committee, maybe we could have it on the agenda, just to say, here's what you're doing, and tell us what is a realistic budget to make it work right?
We'd be happy to do that.
I don't know if I'm able to assign that, but okay. We get a thumbs up from the chair, chair of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a good discussion at last month's audit committee meeting on this audit. And Chief, and you mentioned it tonight as well too, that you're working on a draft plan with the timeline, and it may involve an ask to the Assembly. So my first question is, do you have a date yet on when we might see some of that information or the timeline?
Unfortunately, as I mentioned, Assemblymember LaFrance through the chair, unfortunately, as I mentioned during the committee meeting, the person we selected as the new lead mechanic, who is the most qualified to do this work, is on a military deployment until October. Knowing that employee, we have a feeling that he is diligently working on a plan, but because he's on a military deployment, we don't expect any actual work from him until he returns. We hope to have something in place by early November.
Thank you. And a quick follow-up, Mr. Chair. And I believe, Chief, you had mentioned that back in 2012, there was an efficiency study that showed it's much more efficient of an operation to have a specialized shop for AFD. And would you be able to share that study, or perhaps someone from the administration with us? And that might actually be helpful for, I don't know, at the public safety meeting if it fits then, but if you could share that with us, I would appreciate it.
Yes, we should be able to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, members may proceed to vote.
Ms. Kennedy. Oh, Ms. Kennedy is excused. Mr. Constant and Mr. Constant need to vote.
Mr. Constant?
Yes.
Yeah. That item passes 9-1. With that, we're going to go ahead and take a few-minute break to resolve a technical issue.
John Crabb, could you please assist us at the dais? on its way down. Nelson and Jennifer are already on it. Jennifer thinks that's John's office. She doesn't know his office is up there. So. No, that's the other guy. That's the contractor. Oh, there he is.
Oh, I have an Ernie Hall. This is an old Ernie Hall bag. I keep my stuff. I think that's Dyson. Should we donate that? I mean, I hate to take someone from the planning commission.
Oh, it could be. Yeah, sometimes it is.
I think it was, yeah. Does that look like Fred? See, now it's got my shoes in it. No one will take it over. Is that in case, so we're taking turns reading? What? This is, I've never had one of these before. Never had it. That was for Fred Dyson's. You want a copy of our downtown? Or down for your feet, cleaning out Dyson stuff. Your community council chair.
Somewhat.
Yep. 15 copies.
I don't know why
The problem is that. The problem with me is Suzanne gets to the community council minutes 5 minutes before me and hand one out. Clear out Dyson stuff. I got a lot of it. I got his straw. Look, I got. You guys do this kind of coffee? Special Dyson blend. Okay. Keep these.
Suzanne, what are your kids going to do for school?
Oh, were they giving us more? Oh, this I had. Okay. Yeah, we voted on this. Pulled that.
for my daughter tonight. She is...
Test? Okay. Okay, apologies for that interruption. We are ready to continue. So, we don't have any 13 items, so we're going to move on to our 14 items. Before I introduce this next item, just want to read our rules here for decorum. So for public testimony on public hearing items, please direct your comments to the assembly or the chair and not to anyone personally. Personal attacks are not appropriate. For public hearing items, your testimony must focus on the topic, not other items or subjects. I will, as chair, work to maintain decorum at this meeting and ask for your assistance. Also, during public testimony, I'm going to ask the audience to refrain between each individual speaker from clapping or interrupting other speakers who may have a different point of view. So I think we can all agree on those basic rules of decorum. So let's go ahead and open up. All right, we're going to go ahead and open up item 14A, ordinance number AO 2020-58, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Table 21.05-1, Table of Allowed Uses, to allow homeless and transient shelters in the B3 zoning district by conditional use and waiving Planning and Zoning Commission review. Public testimony is now open on this item. Is this before we begin? Sure, Mr. Constant?
Yep, just a quick communication to the public on this item 2020-58. This is not an intent to dissuade you to talk, but at our last committee meeting, the discussion was to postpone this item indefinitely, which means to kill it and bring it back in a different form in the future. So just so you know, for this item, it's very likely that it's already dead, and the next item is the one you're probably all really here to testify about.
Thank you. So with that, 3 minutes for each individual to testify. And would anyone like to testify on this item? Go ahead.
Don't want to waste any time. Good
Welcome.
evening, Assembly members. My name is Cecilia Preziosi, and you work hard. We hopefully will have some resolve this evening. So,
Can you move
Ma'am.
the mic down a little bit? Thanks.
Thank you.
Pardon that lakeside hat hair here. June 23rd, there was a Midtown community meeting, and some of you people were there. You know who you are, Ms. Allard, Mr. Rivera, Mr. Weldington. There were some questions put on the table, and we haven't gotten any answers. But the first agenda that I want to state is that I'm a healthcare professional, and I worked at API for 14 years. I am not unsympathetic or caring to the clients and the people that are in discussion here, and are not represented by themselves even, because they're not here. So, understanding mental illness or substance abuse illness, they coincide sometimes. I know for a fact that these people are not capable of making cognitive decisions. So the first thing that I like to bring out to the point is, are the shelters going to be mandatory? In other words, somebody in position will actually go to the street corners and pick these people up and bring them to shelters, whether they want to or not. We need to have a vagrancy law or a panhandling law maybe to do that. I don't know. But if it's going to be purely voluntary, we need to stop fluffing up paper and government wasting of time and taxpayers' money and not helping anybody. These people are not able, some of them, not all of them now, cannot make that decision. Let me see here. Okay, and then we have to also find out what kind of facility they're going to be. Is it going to be locked down? Or are they going to hang out like Beans Cafe? And if it's going to be close or adjacent to a neighborhood, you yourselves have to know they're concerned about their safety of their home and their family and break-ins and stuff. We need to have some sort of facility and control over that. The next thing I wanted, the other thing is to determine where these people are from, especially the ones that don't want to comply. If they're from Maine, Alabama, Texas, wherever, the villages, if they don't want to comply with our shelter laws and rehab, then we could send you back to where you came from. Anchorage people or Alaskan peoples do not need to fund the problems of other locations. We don't have the money to do that anymore. The old location, I've been here long enough to know that the old Alaska Native Hospital location is huge. And why can't we build maybe even close to an 8-story facility that will not only, I believe you brought it up.
Ma'am, your time is up.
Can you give me a couple of seconds?
I do have a question for you. Ms. Allard?
Can you tell me a little bit more about your background and your expertise?
Oh, okay. Well, no, I'm not an expert, but working at API for 14 years, I ran a dental clinic, and I've been in healthcare, in dental, and in some areas, volunteer work. I've had a lot of hands-on experience with helping people. And API, you're not cured of mental illness, okay? So I've actually had a practice of people. They come in today, I might not see them for another year, but they come back because that's the nature of mental illness. And those people are everybody here in this room. We have parents, children, neighbors who have mental illness, and they're at API. Okay, and that's my experience, hands-on experience in taking care of them and sitting with them one-to-one in handling their dental oral needs, and they often confide in their other issues. 14 years of that particular position alone. So I know these people are not
Apologies
well.
to interrupt. Ms. Allard, did you have a follow-up?
Were you finished speaking about?
I just wanted to bring up one more thing. Building on the old Alaska Native Hospital, that building, we could have something in interim, but building up that area, we can not only house the adults, but the children under 18 that was brought up here, and even emergency DV victims. But if we had a large facility like that, we need a permanent problem for a with a permanent solution. Housing them here and there with a lease. Who knows what's going on? No, we need to really have a location. And I think building on that piece of property is huge. That's why I like it. It's huge. We can do so much with it. We can have a facility to determine their mental illness, their substance abuse, building job skills, making them have job skills. When I say making, I don't mean bullying. But we could do so much, but that's not going to be built overnight. The companies that will build it will make money. It'll be good for the whole community and everyone involved. And more so, the people that we're worried about, they'll be taken care of.
Ms. Allard, did you have anything else?
No, she's done it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for
Thank you.
listening to me. I hope it's going to be helpful.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you for the opportunity. First, I would like to congratulate...
No, hold on, sir, sorry.
That's okay.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Constant?
what's happening right now is everybody is actually testifying on the item that's not before us. We've only had one, so what we would like to propose to do is change the order of the day right now so that we have the item that you're all here to testify about before us, which is AO 2020-66. 58's going to get killed. And so...
Wait a minute, Chair.
So let's combine the public hearing.
Hold on,
then.
let's let Mr. Constant finish.
I think then let's move to combine the public hearing. Yes, let's just do it because we're going to be here all night anyways.
Because we need to make a decision and move. Okay, so we have a motion to combine the public hearing. Is that what I heard? Okay. Is there a second to that motion? And then we
Wait a
can
minute,
discuss
Mr.
it.
Chair, I have something to say about that.
Sure.
Not
Let's-
everybody
let's-
is only
Hold on, Ms.
here.
Allard. We're going to do a second, and then we can discuss the motion. So is there a second to the motion?
Second, Weddleton.
Mr. Weddleton? Okay. So Ms. Allard, on the motion.
I want to make sure that we clarify that if they do want to come up and they do want to speak about 66 or 58, they're going to be able to come up and have the additional minutes, so they'll have up to 6 minutes to speak on both items combined. Is that correct, Mr.
That is correct.
Constant?
So what I will do is I will ask each individual when you come up which item you want to testify, one or both. After that answer, I will set the timer. If you want to testify on one item, it'll be 3 minutes. If you want to testify on both items, it'll be 6 minutes.
And Mr. Chair, if I might, just quickly, the previous speaker spoke not one iota about Title 21 land use, homeless shelters in B3. The person spoke completely about the context of the next item. And so if we are going to not assert that the person must speak on the matter before us, then we should have the matter before us that they want to speak on. And so that to me is the dilemma. We're going to spend hours here hearing from people talking about the thing that's not even before us.
Thank you. Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to suggest that instead of doing that, we just change the order of the day to talk about 66 first. I do think, based on the feedback we've received by email, that's what most people have comments on. So I'd love to give folks a chance to talk about that, and then people can still testify on 58. So I would move that we change the order of the day.
Second.
So, hold on, we are still deliberating on this motion before us. Ms. Zolotel?
I agree with Ms. Quinn Davidson. I think it's going to be hard to make sure people speak on both items, and it's really just an extension of time at that point. And perhaps after we take up 14B, it will be much more clear whatever direction things may be headed to provide context for 14A.
Okay. Ms. Allard?
I think we have a lot of people here because the agenda said they're going to be testifying on 58, and once they're done, they're going to leave the building so that others can come in and testify. So I'd like to be able to remain in the same, but if we have folks that are due to leave and they don't generally want to testify on 66, I think we need to respect the community. We're elected officials. They put us here to listen to them. Let's just try to have them.
Mr. Chair, after Mr. Dunbar.
Yeah, you're in the queue. Mr. Dunbar?
So I'm going to second Ms. Quinn Davidson's motion. So I believe then we will be debating the most recent motion made, which is the motion to change the order of the day. Now, a gentleman over here asked, why can't we just kill 58? Because we want to kill 58. The problem is we can't kill 58 until we close public hearing. So even though we want to do that, we just can't. So what we're going to do, I hope, is take up 66 and then what Ms. Allard just said, if there are folks who are only here to testify in 66, they can also leave and other people can cycle in, which I think is actually more common than 58. I think 66 is the heart of the matter. And so that's why I second Ms. Quinn Davidson's motion to change the order of the day to take up 2020-66 now.
Okay, so I think at one point we're going to have to make a decision, so I don't want us to keep circling around this. Mr. Constant?
Actually, I will just go with one way or the other, but we have to get the item that is the germane item before the people. And if we don't make the change, then I'm going to be studious about making a point of order when the speaker is speaking about the item not before us, because we are going to have hours of this testimony, and I want to make sure that the person speaking is speaking on the item before us.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton?
You know, I guess we're on this one. I'm more inclined to combine the public hearing, and for people that doesn't take away your voice, actually gives you 6 minutes instead of 3 minutes to talk on your item. It's pretty cool. But I'm more inclined to do that. If we decide to switch, so we do 66 before 58, I'd like to say we can do it after the second person, because that lady seems very intent to speak on 58.
Thank you. Mr. Perez-Verdia?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure I understand where we're at. The item on the floor is not to combine, but it's to switch the order.
Correct.
Is that right?
That is the
And so if
correct
we
motion.
vote that down, then the item on the floor is to combine. Is that correct? Okay. I would prefer that we combined. I think people are already in line. They're all ready to speak. Let's give them the time to speak and let everybody speak.
Thank you. So seeing no further discussion, just to clarify, the motion we have before us is to change the order of the day to take up item AO 2020-66 first, then move on to AO 2020-58. Members may proceed to vote. Mr. Peters.
Crazy night.
That motion fails 5-5. So now the motion we have before us is to combine the public hearing. And just to be clear, if this motion fails, then we're going to continue with public testimony on AO 2020-58, not AO 2020-66, two different ordinances. So members may proceed to vote. Okay, so that motion passes 8-2. So I'm going to go ahead and go through the rules again, just to clarify for members of the public. So we have combined the public testimony on AO 2020-58 and AO 2020-66. What that means is when you come up to testify, just like normal, you would say your first and last name. Then after, let me know which item you seek to testify on, either one or both of the items. At that point, I will set the timer for either 3 or 6 minutes based on your response. So, welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Rabbi Yosef Greenberg. I would like to speak probably about both. So first, I would like to congratulate the mayor and the whole assembly for all the effort that is being put into the most noble cause of helping the homeless in our community. However, in regard to the specific idea of the Golden Lion Hotel as a treatment center, since our campus preschool museum is literally a block away from the Golden Lion Hotel, we are very concerned for the safety of our toddlers, preschoolers, elementary school students, staff, teachers, and visitors who come every day to our center. Our concern is even greater by the lack of communication and transparency about the project itself, the number of people who will be treated, what is the after-treatment support plan, and what is the administration plan for the safety of the neighborhood and the nearby school, campus, and museum. Please remember, No noble cause can be noble at the expense of children's safety. Studies have shown that in many cities around this country, if treatment centers are not well planned and run with highest level of expertise and professional guidance for the present and for the future, they can have a negative impact on the neighborhood, increase crime, and become a safety issue for schools and communities. We believe that the Assembly is rushing into this project with not enough input from the local neighborhoods and community councils, and with no organizational plan from the future providers of these facilities. We hope that you can postpone the decision on a matter of this magnitude until a comprehensive plan of treatment, after treatment, and safety of the neighborhoods can be credibly addressed with community council input as indicated on the Anchorage Home 2020 priorities. Again, I want to thank you all for working on this viable plan to solve the increasing problem of homelessness and drug abuse in Anchorage. It's truly about time. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for you, sir. Oh, yeah. Ms. Allard?
Thank you. I call you Rabbi, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Sir, so my question is, I understand your concern, and your temple is within distance of where this facility would be put.
Right.
I have a question. When folks are walking to church, and if they can't, are they allowed or are they not allowed to bring any sort of, I carry a gun?
Sure.
Can you tell me the religious part of that so that we understand that?
Yes, during the Sabbath and Jewish holidays, so members of our synagogue, which is an Orthodox synagogue, we all walk to synagogue. We do not use cars, and we do not even use cell phones or any technology. So if we have children who are walking themselves, if we have women who are walking themselves, if it's evening services, there's no way for them to call for help if there is something. As it is now, before this treatment center, we have teachers who come at 7:30 in the morning in the winter, and they have to, before they get out of the car, to see if there are no people sleeping in front of our doors. Constantly we have homeless people sleeping there. How much more so when the treatment center is going to be there, no matter how much safety there will be there, but we know what any public building causes attraction, and much more so such a building. So we are very, very concerned, and we don't see any plan. We are disappointed that nobody has worked with us, with our community council, before this plan came to about. So we are really disappointed. We hope we could all work together on this. There's no question in anyone's mind. It's a very noble cause. We have to take care of the homeless. I do not understand why the last 5 years, I've been 30 years in Anchorage, I don't remember ever seeing people in Midtown on the streets. It's the last few years we have this. I don't know what the cost for that, but we definitely have to take care of this. But the question is how to make it safe and to make it with the community. The community will definitely support it, will donate for that, no question about it, but we have to do it the right way.
Thank you. Mr. Constant?
Yes, Rabbi. We received an email today that said, in part, consider using the old Alaska Native Hospital at 3rd Avenue to let them house there. Here's an idea. Erect a large fence, and if they venture to go outside of that area, take their dividend and their native money. This way, it provides them their needs and keeps them, all the homeless people, in one area. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not an expert on how to treat the homeless problem. Experts should be advised. I mean, I respect Anchorage in Alaska, but I come from New York. I believe that we not necessarily have here the ultimate expertise to understand how to run those places. I know other places are struggling, Seattle, San Francisco. I'm not an expert. I'm not sure what is the right way to do, but definitely there is a way to do it. The way is not putting them on a corner, on a busy corner, on the most busy intersection where children and families are all over the place. I don't think as it is now, we're suffering from that all over. We have a property on 36, we have people sleeping there. We have property on 33, people are sleeping there, all over the place. We constantly call the police. It's an ongoing problem, and we just don't feel safe. So why should we add more to that?
So the way might be, send them all to one place and put a fence around them.
I don't know if that's so. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Well, hold on.
I'm not saying that there must be a good way and a pleasant way to do it. What is the way? I'm not sure. I'm not an expert.
Thank you, Rabbi.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Ms. Sallard.
Hi. So, Rabbi, you're not exactly saying you're an expert on everything, and you're willing to help within the community, but you're just saying this possible location might not be the one,
Right.
and you're not saying
100%.
combine them, but maybe we find a different location. Can you kind of explain a little bit more on that, on your feelings on
I
that?
really don't understand what Mr. Council is trying to point out. What are you trying to point out? It was kind of offensive, what you said.
You know-
Disrespectful and offensive.
No, what it was.
Yes,
is
you're
I
being
was-
disrespectful
Rabbi,
right now.
I was reading
You're
exactly
trying to say,
the testimony
I didn't send you
I
this
received.
email. I did
Okay,
not
we
send
should
you
have
such an email.
multiple
I'm trying to
people
understand.
speaking
I
over
sent you
each
such an
other.
email.
Okay.
One
guys.
second. I sent you this email. Why are you asking me about emails someone else sent you? This is disrespectful. You're trying to compare the Nazis to this? What do you bring comparisons here? That's disrespectful. I'm sorry. I'm saying this is not the right way. There are other ways to do it. Figure it out. That's why you're sitting here. It's
Thank
not
you.
my job.
Thank you for your testimony. All right. So I think that was the second individual to testify. So we got a lot more to go through. Oh, 3 reminders. So first is we need to make sure that we are ensuring physical distancing. So folks in the line, if we can make sure that we're doing that, please. Second is just a reminder that we should all be wearing our masks, and I appreciate everyone who has been doing that. And then third is let's please not clap after each person speaking. That's just going to add more time, and I want to be able to hear from as many people as possible today. So with that, welcome.
Am I supposed to have this on or off?
It's on. Yeah, when it's red, it's on.
No, this.
Oh, you could keep it on, please.
You can hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so first, thanks for allowing me to speak on 58.
Could you move the mic closer to you?
So thanks for allowing me to speak on 58 because I've been here.
I still can't hear you. You need to move the mic closer to you. Yeah.
I can hear me, sorry.
There you go.
So thanks for allowing me to speak on 58. I've been waiting a long time, and my family would rather be fishing. But this is important because we're talking public process. My husband was unable to gain access. He eventually had to leave to be with our kids, but then people were let in. So I'm sort of trying to piece together his bit on 58. People were, let's see, so my concerns are, number one, I understand that you've all been asked to kill it, but to my understanding that means it's indefinite. It means you can bring it back, right? No? Okay. I still want to get my ideas out there. Mr. Weddleton, I know you're a sponsor. I know Ms. Zalatel has joined. My concern with the B3 zoning, if we're going to talk about killing it or not, is that I do believe there's still plenty of land. I find it interesting. I didn't get a response back from you, but my initial email to Mr. Weddleton was about 66. But the B3 zoning doesn't really impact, as far as I see on the map, much of your district, right? Although you are downtown, or Spenard, and you are in maybe a B3 zone. I have to look at the map again. But I'm concerned with just amending zoning to make something fit over here when we do have PLI land, right? I mean, we do still have some. We have to bring people to the table. As far as I know, in talking with people I know at the Mental Health Trust, people I know at Catholic Social Services, and people I know at Salvation Army, these are players in the program no matter how you feel about how they did it, they're all willing to come to the table and talk about the 15 acres that they have and build something and use your money. But you don't know that because you didn't put it out for RFP. So now we're dealing with this B3 zoning thing, right? And you want to kill it, and that's like giving a dog a bone because now, right, okay, we'll just get rid of that and we'll still go with what we want to do on 66. That makes me nervous because I'm not really trusting any of you right now. I've grown up here, and I don't know that the building or two that don't meet the requirements that, I don't remember, sorry if it was Mr. Bockenstead or Mr. Schutte, said, oh, yeah, well, we didn't do an RFP because, well, we had these contractors, or these real estate agents that worked with us. Who were they? Nobody could answer. And then, well, that one building doesn't meet the needs, but you told us that the reason you chose these properties was that they met the needs and they were turnkey and you could do this right. But turns out, at least Alaska Club doesn't, right? So you gotta change that zoning somehow. So is this really gonna get killed? So that's for 58. I'm gonna let that sit for the RFP, or as far as B3 goes. I just don't think you can change rules on zoning. The government has to abide just like citizens do. So as far as the rest of it, this was what I had. I'm hoping I have 3 minutes left. But my husband's not here, so maybe you'll grant me a little leeway here. Some of you I have met socially. Some of you I have helped organize fundraisers for. Some of you I have only recently communicated with, but all of you represent Anchorage in some capacity. I am born and raised here. I grew up on the hillside. I served coffee after church every Sunday to homeless people. I knew their names. I get it, they're different now. But I learned to give of myself to my community. I still give my time, my talent, my treasure, and anything I can do to support vulnerable Anchorage residents. I'm also a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a teacher. I think I'm pretty fair. And as one has to be with all those different titles, right? I might disagree with you, but I will listen and I will try to see it from the other side. 3 weeks ago, I learned about the proposal. By the way, I do not live in any area that is impacted by any of these properties that the administration chose. I learned about the properties on 66 as it was being introduced. I was shocked I hadn't heard anything about it before, and I started listing my questions about the ordinance, and I sent them to each of you. My questions quickly became concerns, as responses from all of you ranged from ignorant of the ordinance and promising to get me answers, to off-topic and evasive, but you meant to be soothing, or you were simply non-existent. That means I didn't even get a response. Now, that was only 3 weeks ago. I totally get that you're all busy people. It's summertime, we're in a pandemic, it's a lot of reasons, right? But you represent all of Anchorage, I get it. But we're here for 3 weeks later from the introduction, and all of you are tasked with approving it tonight. That's pretty fast for such an involved ordinance of 4 different properties, which is one of my concerns. I'm asking each of you to regard your constituents and vote no on 66, as the majority are asking you to do. I know each of you that supports the purchase of properties feels strongly about the proposal and that you are good, smart people trying to do the best for our community. But the theory of cognitive dissonance states that it's difficult to hear objections to your ideas and decisions on this proposal. The more you hear opposition, the more you justify your decision and the means with which you will achieve it. People will do anything rather than admit to being wrong when the opposition clashes with their convictions. We've heard several of you twist questions, evade answers, state you do not have to represent constituents, and that regardless, the mayor is going to use his emergency powers to purchase, and we should just accept it. It's difficult to accept for you, I know, but many of us are here to tell you the way this is going down. The lack of a public process, which includes not identifying all the possible properties within Anchorage with an RFP. The lack of public sharing as stipulated in the Anchorage Housing Plan in 2018. The unknown costs, the variable funding resources, the lack of a program operator at any of the facilities, all of it, it's just not right. So will you consider that you might be stuck and only reassured by those within your group of similar thinking? Will you have the strength to vote no to a bad business plan? Not to the support of homeless or addicted residents of Anchorage, but to the way in which you are furthering this agenda.
Ma'am, your time is up, but I do have a couple
From
questions
58,
for you.
will you vote no and try again with your constituents for support?
I have a couple questions for you, ma'am. Mr. Weddleton?
I didn't get your name.
Deanna James. I'm in South Addition.
Okay, thanks. And I think to anyone, we got many hundreds of emails, and I didn't keep up in the last day and a half, but if you sent 3 weeks ago, I hope I responded, because I thought I was keeping up. Well, I'm sorry about that. I
was going to write you personally, but I mean, I got a lot going on.
Sure.
Thank you. Ms. Allard?
Thank you. You said you're from what district?
South Addition.
South Addition. Can you tell me how this has kind of impacted you? I mean, it seems like it's mentally too, right?
Mentally, because I'm a mom. I have a 13-year-old, a 17-year-old. No, I teach middle school. But mentally, no. I mean, what frustrates me the most, you guys, I mean, like, honestly, we've asked for this for so long, And right now, you all of a sudden have the answers, and don't tell me it's the money, because you knew that MLMP sale was coming, because you've already talked about that too. You knew the alcohol tax was coming. Like, it doesn't seem right. And you didn't follow the process. When you ask, why not an RFP? Why not find out all those properties? Why not? You didn't do that step. But we're going to get an RFP for some providers. So how long does that set us off? Like, that's my question, right? Like, how long, once we have these properties, and oh wait, now one of them doesn't work for B3 zoning, but wait, and we still have to get some operators, but we're going to renovate them in the meantime, but you don't really know who's operating them, so you don't really know how they need to be renovated. There's so many questions to me that I go, wait a minute, there are people that are willing to come to this table that have said, yeah, we support you. You're going to do something? Let's do it. Let's clean it up. Because that stuff's crazy down on 3rd Avenue, and it wasn't like that when I was a kid. And it's not Catholic Social Services' fault. Come on. We've been asking.
Did you have anything else, Ms.
Mrs.
Ballard?
James, can I redirect you? How has this impacted you directly?
Me directly?
Yes, please.
Oh, I'm so frustrated. Like, I cannot believe that my assembly doesn't write me back. That the public process, that I worry about our city. I'm so very concerned that the city I know is really headed down the path to Seattle or San Francisco, that we are unheard. And I worry about, like, it's not impacting me. I'm so frustrated that I keep hearing that it's a NIMBY issue. It's not. This is Anchorage, and we can do this really, really well, but not if you guys don't listen and you further your agenda or the agenda of somebody who I don't, you know. I mean, there's a lot of, come on, you've heard them. There are a lot of reasons out there why you might be doing this right now, okay?
Did that get to your question, Ms. Allard?
It did. I have a follow-up, though, with her.
Sure, go ahead.
So you were talking about the RFP. Can you explain maybe a little bit more of your knowledge on that?
My knowledge is a request for proposal, so that you normally in the public process, correct, put out a request for proposal, like, hey, for anything. I mean, you said you're going to do it for the providers, so you put out a request for proposal to real estate agents, and you say, hey, have you got something? And not just looking at the properties that are for sale right now. So you turn to those real estate agents, because you know what, maybe I'm a real estate agent, and I turn to somebody and I say, you know, I just saw this RFP come across, and I remember that you have that property, and they're looking for something in that area. Are you interested? Should we submit that? And then that comes, and all of a sudden you're aware of all that stuff, right? You're aware of a couple more properties instead of just self-selected by commercial real estate agents that are, working with the city. Who were they? I've asked, and I didn't get that answer. Who were those? I mean, I know I'm not supposed to ask
Mrs. James,
questions, but
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thank you for your testimony.
That was my full 6 minutes?
That was, yes.
Man, I had just one more paragraph.
Welcome.
Before we start my time, since we have to testify on both, could you put both up on the screen?
Yeah, we can only put one or the other on the screen. So your intent is to testify on both,
I will
though?
testify on both.
Okay, great. Welcome. Yeah.
Thank you. Are you going to put them both up?
We can only put one or the other.
Might start the clock, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. So go ahead. Thanks.
Okay. I am opposed to ordinance AO 2020-58, which amends Anchorage Municipal Code by allowing homeless and transient shelters in the B3 zoning district by conditional use, waiving Planning and Zoning Commission review. The Anchored Home Strategic Action Plan to solve homelessness in Anchorage consists of 4 pillars to solve homelessness and improve community livability. AO 2020-58 fails to meet the requirements of Pillar 3 in the Anchorage Home Plan, Even with the passing of AO 2020-58, B3 zones do not allow for administration of behavioral health services, which is critical to decreasing the homeless population. The Anchored Home Plan consists of 4 pillars to solve homelessness and improve community livability, but I will focus on Pillar 3. Pillar 3 states that it should increase public safety, develop a public safety strategy that addresses the needs of those experiencing homelessness and the surrounding community to, and I'll focus on B, ensure safe environments at service locations, shelters, and surrounding areas where services are provided. Ensure engagement and service delivery are robust in these areas to prevent adverse impacts on neighborhoods. There is no concrete business plan in place with information regarding specific providers, services, or delivery models to ensure behavioral health needs of the population in these buildings will be met. A lack of behavioral health negatively impacts the target population as well as the surrounding neighborhoods. By circumventing the Planning and Zoning Commission in B3, you can use a building for shelter, but you still cannot provide behavioral health services. People are more likely to experience chronic homelessness when mental health illness and substance addiction are involved. Untreated mental health presents barriers to sobriety, self-sufficiency, and access to transitional and permanent supportive housing. Referrals outside of the facility are not practical or reasonably viable for this population. You are setting them up for failure. All discussion of ensuring safe environments in surrounding areas and preventing adverse impacts on neighborhoods has been ignored, intentionally unanswered, or vaguely described without specific details. You will have zero buy-in from the public without trust. Trust takes years to build, seconds to break, and forever to repair. And now, we don't trust you. Planning and zoning commissions provide a concrete, overarching plan of the city, which guides development of the city in the future while reflecting the priorities and values of its residents. It regulates land use and structures so that the right things go in the right places. We have invested our lives, our time, and our money into this city to make it better. When you bypass the Zoning and Planning Commission, you bypass a crucial part of the public process that protects the entire city, including its most vulnerable. Is that time for 6 minutes, or is that for 3?
Can you say your name?
You said it for 6, so I don't have a warning of my...
Yep. Can you tell us your name, please?
My name is Beth. That's going on my time, though.
Please continue.
So now I'll talk about 66. I oppose AO 2020-66. You should follow the money. You can usually find political corruption by examining money exchanges and transactions, by circumventing due process like planning and zoning, and rigorous evaluation by those communities. This plan by the mayor and assembly gives the perception of wrongdoing. There has been a reckless disregard and violation of the public trust. There has not been a detailed plan published for public comment and scrutiny. The ordinance itself keeps changing and no one knows what's really going on. AO 2020-66 provides $22.5 million for the purchase of 4 buildings using an unspecified combination of CARES Act funds, MLNP sale money, and potential philanthropic donations. Of these 4 buildings, only 2 will be used to house the homeless population impacted due to COVID-19, and they are only capable of housing 285 people. The administration anticipates needing a minimum of another 113 beds. This would require the purchase of yet another building. AO 2020-66 targets 4 buildings that have not been analyzed with due diligence, site analysis, or fiscal responsibility. These proposed buildings are not fit to purchase for the intended purpose. I will speak on 2 of them. The Golden Lion is turnkey ready for housing, but not as a residential inpatient treatment program, as they have no operator, no service providers, no treatment model, and no budget. I suspect in order to use the CARES Act funds, this plan will transform into housing first and treatment second via the mayor's emergency powers, as it is one of the only properties ready to actually house people safely during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Golden Lion has a few major problems, but remember, I'm following the money. It is located on the most dangerous intersection in Anchorage. What if the hotel is slated to be taken, at least in part, by the state as part of eminent domain to expand the highway intersection? This means the city will purchase the building using federal dollars it shouldn't use, pay back the federal dollars using MLNP sale money that does not yet exist, and later sell part or all of the property to the state for state dollars for the DOT project. That's called a bait and switch. And the perception is, who profits? The Alaska Club site is not safe to house people overnight without extensive renovations. It needs sprinklers, bathrooms, maybe a few windows. If you use CARES Act money to purchase the building for emergency overnight housing, or you are using CARES Act money to purchase a building for emergency overnight housing due to COVID-19, and yet it cannot safely house people overnight. Whenever legitimate concerns have been raised by residents and assembly members, Chris Schutte, the director of the Economic and Community Development, reminds us that this is only a real estate transaction. How incredibly naive. They frequently remind us that the Golden Lion could have been purchased by a private company, but it hasn't, because it's not a worthwhile investment and it's too big of a liability in that location. It's a shady process, a shady business, and a shady deal.
Your time is up. I have a question for you, though. Ms. Allard?
Thank you. Miss Beth, can you tell me where your neighborhood is and where you're located and how it's impacted your?
So I live in College Village, and I am on the edge of the neighborhood. So I'm right by 36. So we have a lot of foot traffic behind our yard. We have had a lot of security issues. I'm about 2/10 of a mile from the Golden Lion. My temple is also 2/10 of a mile from the Golden Lion. My preschool is in that building as well, where my kids go. My kids go there for my youngest goes there for preschool. My older kids go there for after-school education, and it impacts every single part of our life. I alone have had to make calls and let them know when there are people there who shouldn't be, who are trespassing. I've had people trespass into my house. We had someone last summer who either was on abusing substances or had a mental illness that was not being treated at the time, and they tried to kick our door down at 3:30 in the morning. They were if we didn't go out and stop them, then they were coming in. And, we depend on the police, and we respect the police, and their hands are tied. They're busy. They can come and help, but they can't respond right away. You put this facility there. The facility has a parking lot, which part of it will be taken for the DOT project. It has no outdoor recreational space. And in talking in the meetings, there's no discussion about where are they going to go outside? It's never discussed. And we're told, well, it's not going to be a locked-in treatment center. But we're also told they have a very busy schedule, so they won't be out roaming the neighborhood. I'm sorry. They're not in prison, and even prisoners have access to outside.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's not fit. It's not.
Thank you for your
testimony. You can't do that to
people.
So.
I have a follow-up.
Yes.
So in regards to this, do you have some sort of solution or a suggestion that you can give to this body?
I think it needs to go through the appropriate process. It all has to go through planning and zoning. You have to communicate with the public. We found out by accident. We found out because the news leaked, and it went to a newspaper, and then everyone distributed the newspaper article. We were not supposed to know about this. This was supposed to pass in the middle of the night with no one knowing about it. The only reason you have held Zoom meetings with us is because you got caught.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beth.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I'm going to touch on both, so.
Sure.
But I have already timed this, and it'll be less than 6 minutes. Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity. Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. My name is Barbara Ramsey. I'm an associate broker with Remax Dynamic Properties. My husband Claire and I have worked in the Anchorage real estate market since 1974 and 84 respectively. We've written a real estate column for over 30 years and have served on the Real Estate Commission. I am also a past president of the Geneva Woods Association, so now you have an idea of why I'm involved. I'd like to give you a real estate professional's viewpoint on why the proposals before you will have a negative impact on the surrounding residential neighborhoods. At the July 9th Zoom meeting about these proposals, someone indicated that there was no evidence that there would be a decrease in area values. Well, other types of external forces, such as crime, foreclosures, sex offenders, illegal drugs, can decrease values and can stigmatize a residential neighborhood, sometimes with a snowball effect. A Longwood University study, which I can submit, I left it in my car, they won't let me go out to get it, so, but I can submit that for you, focused on treatment centers specifically and quantified the effect of a residential rehab centers on nearby real estate values. The study sample was composed of residential listings in the real estate market between 2001 and 2011. The final data consisted of about 195,000 homes on the market and about 111,000 homes that eventually sold. The community has 36 substance abuse treatment centers, half of them treated opiate addiction, located within the broader area, and 9 were located within the city limits. The Longwood study analysis concluded an 8% decrease in neighboring property values with a treatment center, and up to 17% if the center also treated opiate addiction. Comments were also made that the anticipated use will likely be for alcohol treatment with sleepover facilities as needed. However, the final decision was up to a yet-to-be-determined provider. In the Longwood report, a Substance Abuse Mental Health Service Administration survey of over 14,000 facilities, and they had a 94% response rate, indicated many patients in residential treatment had a dual diagnosis, which was mental health and addiction. 39% of the clientele had dual diagnosis. Combined alcohol and drug addiction accounted for approximately 45%. Clients in the treatment solely for drug abuse accounted for 34 to 36%, and only 18 to 20% of the patients abused alcohol. The provider, of course, is going to want to cover the full range of services to ensure payment and profit from the broadest range of options. Another item, locally, on June 2020 mini documentary available on YouTube entitled The Last Stop on Carluck, showed how one small business owner continues to deal with issues stemming from Brother Francis Shelter and Beans Cafe. It is truly worth viewing. Please don't be mistaken. I believe we need to solve this problem. However, the locations are not the solution. So is there a better solution? Yes, a more thorough search, and you've heard that from the others before me, for locations to start for other stakeholder landholders. Plus, aiming at a comprehensive approach and stop trying to create a patchwork of proposals that create more problems and pass on the problem. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. I do have one. Ms. Allard?
You mentioned landowners. Do you know who those landowners are?
I specialize residentially, but what I did do is take a real quick peek at what the Alaska Mental Health had, and just ran a quick tax roll on them, and they had 31 vacant lots. 3 of those were kind of continuous over in Community Park, Alaska subdivision. That's about 12 acres. There's another one that's over there on 40th in Lake Otis that's about 5.5. So there's land. It's available. And the Alaska Mental Health mission, if I might read it, it says the Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority is a state corporation that administers the Alaska Mental Health Trust, a perpetual trust, to improve the lives of beneficiaries. The trust operates much like a private foundation, using the resources to ensure that Alaska has comprehensive, integrated mental health program. And that was just one quick search. I'm sure as a commercial or a land person, they could be able to find others.
Follow up. So can
Sure.
you tell me what they can actually offer? Is that all in there when you said the landowners and what they can offer is the amount of properties?
That was just one example that I
Okay.
did from the Alaska Mental Health Trust.
Thank you.
They have the financial wherewithal. I understand they have over $700 million. I mean, if you own the land already, then you just have to build the building. And that's got to be a lot cheaper than what you're anticipating spending now.
So you're a real estate expert. You've been doing this for a long time.
Residential real estate.
Residential.
And that's why I'm here, is my concern is what's going to happen to the residential values for the surrounding properties. I have a great example. On the 20th, someone wanted to show a property in Geneva Woods. They showed it. She loved it, absolutely loved it, fit all of her needs. Only problem was she had just heard about the Golden Lion, and she had angst about her safety. Single woman, she was going to be there by herself. She wouldn't be able to feel comfortable walking the neighborhood. So she didn't buy.
So do we have less residential property downtown than we do in the Midtown area that would be affected?
Well, the Midtown area, if we speak to Golden Lion, you're going to have, and this is coming from someone who deals with the public, answers their questions, watches them when they research a home to buy. So having the change for the Golden Lion is going to come up, and they're not going to buy. And they're not going to buy potentially Geneva Woods, College Village, and into Rogers Park, especially if they start to hear more crime, which is the problem. I mean, Geneva Woods, we had an increase in crime, so everybody started getting external cameras. So when there was a problem, they were able to figure out who it was, or what the car might have been driving, or who the person was that was walking up and down the streets.
Thank you, Mrs. Ransney.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Jamelia George. I'm a resident of College Village. I live on Wentworth. I'm 1 block from the elementary school, which is one of the top 3 elementary schools.
Sorry to interrupt. Are you testifying on one or both items?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you testifying on one or both items today?
I'm very sorry. I'm going to speak to both items.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is one of the top 3 schools in the entire city. It's one of the top reasons that professionals choose to buy in my neighborhood. They, for years, have called it Doctor Village because it's full of medical staff. They're 3 to 4 minutes from all 3 hospitals. They're big families that live in this neighborhood. I have been there over 25 years, 40 in Anchorage. What concerns me about this is the lack of process. One of the things that is a sure sign of failure in any business plan is the failure to understand what it is you want at the end of the day. You don't buy the property and say, I'll figure out what to do with it later. If you're spending public dollars, you better have a process. I'm very concerned about the notice and lack of opportunity for public input. I think, frankly, it's unconstitutional. And as an assembly member or a mayor, with all due respect, I would not want that to be part of my legacy in public service. This is a private sector economic effect. If you say, as you do, that the ordinance has no private sector economic effects, you're wrong. It will impact my biggest investment, my home. We just heard from Claire Ramsey what it's going to do to my neighborhood. Your proposed ordinance fails to provide notice and opportunity for the residents who are directly impacted to oppose this action. Do you have to solve homelessness? I hope you can, but I hope you do it more thoughtfully. Anchorage is entitled to, whether you live in my neighborhood or not, to respect and believe that your elected representatives are going to have your back on everything that has an economic impact. I'm shocked, frankly, that your Department of Law attorney who prepared this for you didn't advise you that the failure to provide public process and input would be a failure that could subject you to personal financial liability. Maybe they did and you ignored it, but in any event, your efforts to rezone my neighborhoods misguided, and I believe that without proper public process, it's unconstitutional. I support the city's efforts, and I don't believe in taking a problem to someone without a solution. When Mayor Sullivan was in office, I met with his director of homelessness. I brought the director from the Department of Defense's IRT program at the Pentagon with me because I had been working with the IRT in relocation of Newtok. I brought the IRT to the table. They take on projects that communities cannot themselves do, and they bring their labor, their equipment, and their talent. I had prepared a project to take the native land, the hospital that the native hospital had been on before it was built in Tudor, and did the whole proposal. I got the deer in the headlines look. Never returned my phone calls after the meeting, and the Department of Defense's director of IRT training was shocked. She had been spending 40 years in Alaska doing work like this. And she was shocked there was no interest. And today, we're trying to put a Band-Aid on a bubble, and it's just going to explode in us. I hope you take the time. I hope when you make your decision, it's one you are proud of. I don't think you will be without solving this. No one should rezone property where somebody already owns the land without a public process. Number two, what you've heard about treatment of behavioral health and addiction disorders is very true. You have to have the full modality. And you can't do it all at one location. But where you site it will have everything to do with whether it's successful. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony.
Yeah. Okay.
Welcome.
Welcome. My name is Joe Dahl, Joedahl. I'll be speaking to both.
Go ahead.
I'll start out with 66. We're going to be doing a team approach with people behind me are following. You're going to hear more about that as I go along. Tonight we're here to voice our concerns and point out the problematic issues with the mayor's plan for supporting the homeless. The mayor is seeking your support and approval for this plan. He wants you to buy into a concept that has little chance of succeeding as presented and wants to provide few details with no oversight. He has already stated that his plan has widespread support and the proposal is nothing but bluster. His justification for this statement is there's no lawsuit, at least not yet. We are here as proof to the contrary of that statement. You're going to hear about proposals that conflict with the emergency policy already in place that shows little chance of changing in the foreseeable future. Proposals such as spreading the homeless population to 4 properties listed on this ordinance in order to maintain social distancing or some other COVID-related reason, when in fact that as long as the situation exists where social distancing is required, the Sullivan and Bimboki arenas can open for their intended purposes. The homeless population housed there don't have to move until large gatherings with no social distancing are possible. You're going to hear about how the current proposal is anchored in the nexus of health, behavioral, alcohol, drug, and detox treatment services. A detailed suggestion will be presented to provide the services proposed in one location with professional providers. You're going to hear how the mayor is attempting to use the COVID crisis as an end run around long-established rules and procedures for this type of activity. He is attempting to create a permanent change to a neighborhood dynamics all under the guise of an emergency. How is it an abuse of power? And it embodies the philosophy of never let a good crisis go to waste. You're going to hear about there will be an increase in crime, an increase in drug use, and an increase in drug trafficking. You're going to hear about how our most vulnerable people, our children, will be at the most risk, how they will be subjected to an environment littered with feces, discarded needles, broken glass, lewd acts performed in public open spaces. You're going to hear about how the economic impact study has not been performed. A neighborhood safety analysis has not been performed. A review by the Planning and Zoning Commission has not been performed. A traffic study has not been performed. You're going to hear about how the very poor real estate value at $22.5 million, how the refit costs are estimated are unrealistic. You're going to hear about the property value loss and property damage. That the people that follow me are going to outline the aforementioned subjects and more in detail. Now for 58. The zoning of this, the B3, as you can see, I live specifically in the neighborhood where the zoning would change. And it takes me back to when my children, who are now grown, grew up there. I can remember somewhere around 1990 or so, how the street was dug down higher than I am tall. I'm 6'1". Completely resurfaced. Nice, beautiful area. My kids grew up there on their skateboards, their rollerblades, their bicycles run around in smooth pavement. It was best. It's now, winter has taken its toll. It's now decayed quite a bit. But I never really worried about them in that area. We had neighborhood people looked around and watched them. It was a great location. I had a chance to move to the hillside, some other places, but I chose not to because my kids enjoyed baseball and hockey, and it was a perfect location to go back and forth. And it just kills me to understand that this zoning could be done to usurp that. And when it happens, it becomes permanent because this will be a protected population that goes there. And so I'm highly against that. And what bothers me the most is that the homeless industrial complex is going to get involved in this, and they are already. I saw something on that tonight to the tune of $200,000. And they're going to drag this out, and they're going to keep sucking money until there's no end. Thank you. If you have questions.
Thank you for your testimony. I got a question for you, Ms. Allard.
Can you tell me how you found out about what was going on as far as the ordinance? And did you hear it through the paper, the press, your community council? Just curious.
I found out by accident. My neighbor actually found it out through a newspaper article, if I'm not mistaken. And she came over and asked advice on filling out a card, a wording on it to send out to other neighbors to say, hey, this is going on. So we sent out, so those of people in our neighborhood that received a yellow card, I helped write that, but she did it. She paid for it out of her own pocket, which you may hear her state that tonight. She is here. And sent it out to all our neighbors. And when we went out, we did a follow-up visit. So we took, and we're going to walk around the next day. From there, I found another neighbor that was walking in the neighborhood, left something in my mailbox. And also we found another neighbor come to the door and had the card in hand. I said, do you know how you got that? She thought it was from this She thought it was from this body. I said, no, it was from us. And we decided to walk our neighborhood. We went to 80 different houses and did this and talked to everyone. Almost no one had heard. Matter of fact, I can't think of anyone that heard of it. No one said it. Just like you see all these no stickers, you don't see anybody with a yes sticker. And nobody was for it. And that's how we found out about it.
What area are you from again? I'm sorry.
I'm from Heather Meadows. Heather Meadows is directly across the street from this building, across from Home Depot, IHOP, Lowe's, across to the road. Okay. Whereas right there, matter of fact, now that we're on mainly telework now, I take some breaks during the day and get out, come walking. Sometimes I'll walk down to this park and walk there. I'm out.
You're from Midtown as well?
Excuse me?
Is it considered Midtown too?
Yes, it is Midtown.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hi. My name is Julie Blyer, and I'll talk on 66 first, and then I'll go to 58. I brought the Municipality of Anchorage Assembly priorities. Your priority number 1 is communications. There was absolutely no communication to the community on the placement of the 4 buildings the municipality has chosen. A number of community councils do not meet during June through August. Notification of this ordinance came out June 2nd. And only by the news article in Must Read Alaska by Susan Downing, I don't believe she is associated with the Anchorage Assembly. I have not seen it on the media at all. Our homeless do deserve our respect, support, prayers, and help. They do not, however, have the right to reside on public lands for their choosing. This impacts Anchorage progress in one of the state's impacts Anchorage progress in one of the state's greatest economic and financial gains, tourism. Unfortunately, our leaders have renounced their responsibility and allow our homeless population to illegally camp wherever they choose. Anchorage has been saturated with homelessness for years. Only has the past few years involved drugs, which has heightened the crime rate toward neighbors surrounding homeless encampments that have popped up throughout the Anchorage Bowl and also within the encampments. The municipality and ACLU has allowed the homelessness to get away with loitering, theft, camping in public spaces, campfires within public spaces, defecating in public spaces, public buildings, public drunkenness, and basically they feel they no longer have to follow the rules. If buying these buildings for the homeless for the shelter or the rehabilitation facilities, what is the plan to get them off the street if they don't want to? Beans Cafe and Brother Francis had shelters for them. Due to the rules, many of them have set up surrounding tents around the building, and no arrests have been made. There are shelters and rehabilitation facilities already available to help end homelessness. Tudor Rescue Mission, Shandell Narcotic Drug Treatment Center, Anchorage Treatment Solutions, Genesis Recovery Services, Clitheroe Center, Akil, Jet Morgan Treatment Services, South Central Foundation Detox. I can go on with a number of treatment centers that are already in place. Maybe the priority of the Assembly should be to communicate with the homeless in getting them in for treatment or face the consequences that all residential Alaskans must face. For 58, I disagree actually with both ordinances, just so you know. How will this ordinance impact neighbors around Anchorage? I have researched some studies done on the impact to surrounding neighborhoods in other states and have found very little information. I think Anchorage citizens can do their own study, having driven by Beans Cafe and Brother Francis Shelter prior to the COVID-19. Only when the police were assigned 24/7 did the crime rate go down, only on that property. But the non-compliant residents set up camp in surrounding areas. The lawlessness associated with homeless activity is now being spread around the Anchorage businesses and residential neighborhoods. By placing the homeless in these 4 locations, and they do not comply with the rules, camps will be set up in the surrounding areas. Jacobson Park, for example, has had a number of encampments since the removal of the tents on 3rd Avenue. In the last few months, dozens of police and fire department calls have been made to this location. The news media reported a woman that died in Midtown this past winter. What the media did not report is that this woman was stabbed to death in Jacobson Park. That's a murder. That was not reported in the media. Another example, multiple encampment fires in Rogers Park have led to residential homes being evacuated. Police have admitted there's criminal activity in most homeless camps. As they have said, there are people fighting to survive with nothing. Please keep in mind, Anchorage neighborhoods are fighting to survive the criminal activities thrown at them from assaults, thefts, fire, car home security systems, increased insurance on their car and home values decreasing 80 to 17%, loss of work due to the crime. Neighbors are not given advance notice of this permanent building site, rehabilitation homeless shelters, transitional housing, or daycare facilities for these homeless. There are multiple schools, liquor stores, child care facilities within close proximity. Members of the Assembly and Ethan Berkowitz, please prepare and publicly share a community impact statement relating to 2020-66 to include economic, environmental, public safety, public health that impacts before deciding on this ordinance. For the record, there are a couple of Assembly members that were asked that are in our district if they were going to vote for this ordinance by the majority of residents on how they feel. One of the Assembly members said, he can listen to everybody, but he does not have to agree with us. That means that you are making, you do not have to agree with your constituents, Assembly member, but I do hope that you vote to represent the constituents in your district. This is something I hope everybody on the Assembly, including Ethan Berkowitz, remembers who you are representing.
Thank you. I have a question for you, Ms. Allard.
Hi. So it sounds like you're not necessarily against the homeless being helped or a rehabilitation. Is there?
A number of Assembly members have heard me talk before. I have come up with ideas on how to help the homeless. I think it's going to take too much time for me to take care of that issue, but there are some ideas that have been brought to the Assembly, and that is not, it's gone in one ear and out the other.
Can you hit on a couple of points for me that you've brought to our attention, if you could remember?
There are 3 states that are working with the homeless and succeeding. One of them is Rhode Island. One of them is Florida. I'm sorry, I don't have that with me. And then there was one, San Diego.
What were some of the key things that you felt that the Assembly could know tonight to maybe help?
What I think that you need to understand is that if you keep the homeless within their environment where they are able to access liquor, drugs, keeping within the drug trafficking, sex trafficking, they're not going to get away from that environment. Anybody knows that's been through rehab, they move them out of that environment for a couple of years, and that's what some of these programs did. Once they're through that, they're through a training program, and they're learning to live on their own again. So, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome.
Yes, I'd like to cede my time to Carolyn behind me.
Yeah, that's unfortunately not how this works. So everyone has 6 minutes.
I'm sorry.
Everyone has 6 minutes. So if you have up to 6 minutes, depending on if you're testifying on both items. So is that what you plan on doing, on testifying on any items?
I would like her to be able to speak a little longer.
Unfortunately, ma'am, that's just not how the rules work.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
I'm sorry. Unfortunately, ma'am, that is just not how the rules work. So if you'd like to testify and state whatever you have to say, we're here for
Then
that.
I will let her go ahead and speak.
Okay, thanks. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. I know that it's been a long night, and I want to thank you all for your time and your consideration. I know this has been frustrating. I do not live in one, oh, sorry. My name is Carolyn Cookerts, and I'll spell it for you because it's a horrid one. It's Kucker, T as in Tom, Z as in zebra. I come tonight in opposition of both 2020-58
And you're speaking, sorry to interrupt, you're speaking on both?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
And I'm going to go ahead and start with 2020-58. I come to you tonight and do not live in any of the neighborhoods. I guess I'm on 2020-66. Well, it's combined anyway. I do not live in any of the neighborhoods affected. I'm a Southwest Anchorage resident. What I am is I am a recovering alcoholic. So I come to testify about the locations first. And part of that is my story. And my story is that it's really hard for an addict of any kind. And I can't even tell you, some of you may have known me in my former life, I can't tell you, I can't remember much from that. As embarrassing as that is to say, is that's how messed up my brain was. Now, I would have continued, all the people who enabled me, and God bless you, everybody was just trying to help, but they couldn't. The only person that could help me was me, and I had to hit rock bottom, and many of you know what that meant. What I also had to do was be removed. The people that I associated with then, I couldn't, I had to leave. I couldn't do it. The places that I went, no more. I had to be removed from the situation. And then certainly all the things that I did, I had to stop. I'd already lost my job, so, not much there, but nearly lost my house. I had to be taken away. And I come to say that putting a treatment center right smack dab in the middle of Midtown, that's not okay. You are not removing them from their situation. You are putting them at a greater risk for failure. You're setting them up to fail, which breaks my heart because this recovery, and I'm 5 years sober, has been the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. And it hurts to stand up here and hear everybody talk about them, the addicts, because I too am a criminal just like them. And I had to crawl my way out. I scraped chicken guts off the floors in order to be able to get up to a decent job again and to be able to keep my child. But if you want them to succeed, sticking them in the middle of Anchorage and putting these people behind me for all the things that I couldn't get together in my life, I shouldn't ruin their neighborhoods. It's not fair. I'm so thankful for my treatment options, but they needed to be away from here. And there is no reason that 0.15% of our population, which do the numbers, that's what this chronically homeless population is, should take away from the property values and anything else. One key part of my recovery has been taking personal responsibility. I messed up. I needed to change. And they need to come out and say the same thing. Where are they tonight? Where is everybody who needs this housing? Because I'll tell you, I was crawling and begging for the treatment because I wanted it so bad. I wanted a new life, and that's another thing. You have to give them that. If you look at the studies in Utah and the places that have, well, I've heard Utah maybe having a little struggle, but for the most part, for the past 15 years, Utah's plan has succeeded. They moved them to this nice, serene facility out of town where they could learn and get back on their steps without affecting the neighborhoods that were there. And then they job trained them and brought them back where they could become productive members of that society. Now what they did is, if you look at the pictures online, they have these really cool facilities. Like, I want to live there. So I was like, oh, I messed up in the wrong place. But they had some really cool, like, reentry facilities. You have to make them want to go there. I mean, I'd suggest, well, why don't we put them at Clitheroe? Now, come on, that doesn't affect any neighborhoods. It's far away from everyone, but it's still close enough that family and things like that can happen. And I was told by some people within the law enforcement industry that when they try to bring them to Clitheroe, when they're given a choice between Clitheroe and Aquila, they pick Aquila. And you know why? Because Aquila's right there on Northern Lights. I guess the drug dealer's right down the street, the liquor store's, 2 steps away. I'll just call my buddy and get a bottle of Jack. Believe me, I did it, I know how many relapses you go through and the disgusting things that have to happen. But that's why I'm asking you to truly consider what you're doing. I've been through it, I know. And then as far as, that's enough about that, but as far as the public process goes, that's my problem with 2020-58. So you have a planning and zoning process and codes that are this thick and a Title 21 and everything else. I just want to point out that if the true intent of this assembly is to actually help the homeless, this is the conditional use permit change, not the conditional use permit, just a change, because the Gospel Rescue Mission, starting in January of this year, wants to build a new kitchen to feed more people. Now, they promised in this document there will be no new beds, no new services, just a bigger kitchen to feed people. They had to file, let's see here, not only is this 300 pages, so I couldn't get through it all, I apologize, but it was $7,080 fee. Now, if anyone's seen the Gospel Rescue Mission, I'm sure this could have been used on food or blankets or something else. But we charged them. They had to hold 3 community meetings. They had to go through planning and zoning. The planning department asked every single department in the city, the police, the traffic people, they got called out. How many people go through the intersection? Guess what? Less than 100 an hour. We actually found that out. Now, that's not quite the case at New Seward and 36th, but at least at the Gospel Rescue Mission, we found out that traffic's low enough. Why? Because this was the proper public process. And I'm not sure why they had to go through it, and these guys don't, but I just want to see this for these 4 buildings. I think I've really spoken enough. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for you, Ms. Allard.
Hi, Carolyn. So my question would be for you. Again, it's remarkable of your recovery, and thank you for sharing that with everybody. I know that's tough.
Thank you.
You're welcome. My question to you is, you were talking about the Gospel Rescue Mission?
Yes.
So you read that as much as you could. I know it's pretty long. Could you tell me
bedtime
when that,
reading.
do you know on that one, when the process started and when it has ended, or is it ended?
Oh, well, wait.
Could
So
you
actually, there's
clarify?
more fun with this.
you
They had to,
explain?
this used to be in a B3 zone, and that's why it applies to 2020-58. But in 2012, when they decided to build this rescue mission, they had to go through the whole zoning process and change it from a B3 to a PLI, which would then be subject to a conditional use permit. So in 2012, they went through a packet that was 5 times this thick. I couldn't even print the whole thing, so I ran out of reams of paper. And then that led to, when they wanted to add this kitchen, since they're under a conditional use permit, in January of this year, so January 2020, what is this filed? Oh, well, this sheet, January 27th, 2020. Then they went through, they had to go through all the community meetings and the filing and get the fee. Then they had to go in front of planning and zoning, who approved it with some conditions. I couldn't figure out what those were, I apologize. Finally on, July 6th. So they were in that process for 7 months. I'm sure 2 months of that went to COVID, like the rest of our lives. But that's when that started for just this part, and that's just to expand the kitchen.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Welcome.
My name is Thad Phillips, and I live in South Anchorage. So I'm not a resident of Midtown. I personally don't have a stake in this from a
Sorry
residential
to interrupt.
standpoint.
Are you going to be testifying on one or both items?
Both.
Both items. Okay, thanks.
58 and 66. I want to speak to 58 first. I guess I'm appalled that the Anchorage Assembly would produce this ordinance, because I guess having been here since 1984, I've seen the Title 21 worked and reworked and trying to drive our town, municipality of Anchorage, into a better place for everybody. The community is a community at whole for the entire residents, homeless people, business, tourists, everybody that come through this town. And so there's been a long process of trying to hone and strengthen this town so that it works for everybody in a cohesive manner. And now this ordinance comes out, produced on June 2nd, and it looks like that this was an attempt to rail through special rights for the administration to be able to act without public input and bypassing a process that I've been witnessing for years up here. And so that is amazing. One of the other things that jumps out at me, because I have read or done the best that I can at reading through the recent gap analysis that was produced, the strategic action plan, and the Anchored Home 2020 priorities. In the strategic plan, someone mentioned before there's 4 pillars. Pillar number 3 has 3 action items that are associated with doing due diligence, completing studies, audits of public spaces, complete street designs, increased safety of pedestrians, and doing studies that will support what you're trying to do. So I guess what I am amazed that we would have gap analysis. We have quarterly or monthly reports that update on that. You have a plan that was written and adopted in, I can't remember when the last one, the first one was in 2006, and now we have another, and that's the other thing, that there's been a succession of plans, and that's fine. We should be continuing to hone our plans, but now we're deviating from the plan. We're not even going forward with the action items that are in that plan. And so I guess I'm just amiss and a suspect, and I've lost trust that the body that we elect to help deliver the process and make sure that things are open, fair, and the public is aware of things is actually taking advantage of a crisis situation, a pandemic, to railroad an agenda home and slip something past the public. This is not even 2 months since both of these ordinances were produced, and now here we are tonight going to vote and slam them home without due public process. People, it's summer, they're being quarantined at home. We're trying to figure out how to work with remote and Zoom and all the rest of that. And that's the other thing, a number of people can't even get in here and testify because of the current situation. It sure seems like you're taking advantage of the current situation and leveraging off of that. With regards to 66, the acquisition and operations of the identified properties is not a specific component of the strategic action plan or the Anchored Home 2020 priorities, nor could I find it in the recent gap analysis. The current plan identifies the need for additional beds, but lacks specifics on how this will be accomplished and how these facilities will be configured to achieve the desired outcome. The ordinance dated June 23rd is being fast-tracked through the system during a time of crisis. The Assembly seems to be taking advantage of the current pandemic to skirt the public process. This is simply a mad dash to buy something and figure out if it'll work. The Assembly wants to get pregnant with these properties and make it difficult for the public to back out later. 3 of the 4 properties are near liquor stores, daycare, preschools. This urgency to spread the homeless across town is a result of the Anchorage Downtown Coalition pressuring this administration to push the problems to a different part of town. It's not based off selection of optimal locations. The May Anchored Home public presentation indicates that the expected downturn in the economy due to COVID-19, citing increase in the homeless population due to unemployment rates. We know this is coming up. We have an economic downturn. We're going to have a struggle financially. Yet the Assembly estimates the purchase of these properties will result in $300,000 a year in lost tax revenues and will cost an additional $7 million annually to operate. This increase of $7.3 million adding to our financial commitments while knowingly and willingly committing that money, knowing that we have an economic downturn ahead of us, and you're going to saddle future obligations to the people.
Sir, your time is up, but I have a question for you. Ms. Allard.
Thank you. You again, what was your name? Dan Phillips?
Thad Phillips.
Mr. Phillips, can you tell me, if you don't mind, what you do for a living again, if you don't mind?
I'm actually a professional cost estimator, project controls person, so what I do cost estimates on new construction, various types of construction, planning, scheduling, and then cost control against those targets.
So when you're doing things like that, do you feel that the money that we are spending or potentially going to spend, is this good use of that money as far as?
No.
Can you elaborate on that and tell me why?
No. The problem is that we are taking a build it and then figure it out, or buy it and figure it out and remodel it and make it, shove it in to fit the box so that we can get something slipped through right now. Normally, you will lay out a detailed plan that everybody buys into, and then everybody works together to execute the plan. You figure out the best value for the dollar. You go through a process which optimizes your plan for the best value on the money that you're going to put into it for the expected outcome.
So in the military, we call it PI, plan, implementation, and execution.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome.
Hello, my name is William Gornto. I'm a resident of Geneva Woods, and I'm here to talk about both of the proposed ordinances. So starting with 2020-58, it's a proposal to allow any B3 property to be a homeless shelter, and the way that the ordinance is written, planning and zoning isn't needed for the passage of the ordinance. And I inquired of Assembly members various aspects of this, and I was told that, well, the Planning and Zoning Commission is not an expert in homelessness. The Assembly is, so they really don't need to be involved, and then they can be involved later when there's a conditional use permit, and if you involve them earlier, they're just going to have the same questions asked twice. Well, first of all, Planning and Zoning should be an expert in land use and different occupancies of different locations, and the impact of occupancies on surrounding locations. And keeping planning and zoning involved in the full spectrum of which they have historically acted is critical to accomplish that, because they're not by definition a political body when the Assembly is by definition a political body. The other thing I was told is you still have to get a conditional use permit. And so I go straight to the Anchorage Municipality website, and it says, what is the likelihood that my conditional use will be approved? The answer, conditional use applications that comply with the zoning regulations, subdivision regulations, and the comprehensive plan are nearly always approved. So when I put all that together, I view Ordinance 2020-58 as being a way to remove a step from the process and to circumvent ordinary processes, and I don't see that there's any appropriate reason for that ordinance to be considered. So moving on to 2020-66. Earlier tonight I heard someone on the Assembly comment that there's a bunch of angry and frightened people here. And that might be true, but it might also be true that the same people are intelligent and rational and logical. And I heard some other comments tonight. It was 10B5, I believe, which had to do with certain CARES Act money going to schools for mental health. And I heard a discussion amongst the members as to why are these 12 schools listed? Why aren't other schools listed in my district, in Fairview? I heard, why aren't any schools listed that are in Chugiak and Eagle River? And I thought it was a fair question, a fair rational discussion, which centered around why these locations and why not other locations. And so fast forward to 2020-66, we have 4 locations before us under consideration. A lot of the people in this room, including myself, have asked the questions, why these 4 locations? Which other locations were considered? Were other locations considered, yes or no? If not, why not? If other locations were considered, how was it determined that these locations are better than the other ones that were considered? Other questions that we asked are, what were the criteria for determining that any of these locations are suitable for the intended use? I heard from another Assembly member tonight that a plan is under development to come up with criteria for homeless shelters and that there might be some permit process. If criteria don't already exist and a basis of selection and a basis of considering locations for suitability doesn't already exist, and if impact analysis on what is a particular location going to do to the surrounding properties doesn't already exist, then I don't understand the rationale for going out and purchasing properties without the proper due diligence taking place. And what I can say is that in all of the interchanges that I've had with various emails, various questions, and seeing the questions and responses from others, I've seen a lot of responses to the questions that were asked, but I've seen very few answers to the questions that were asked. So a lot of words that say something, but they don't actually answer the question that's asked. And I have a great fear, back to the fear, that this ordinance is going to be passed in spite of all of the impassioned comments that we're hearing behind us and from me. And if that happens, that will just be one step because the legal process starts the next day and there will be an application submitted for a ballot question to repeal the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for you, sir, actually. Ms. Allard?
Can you tell me your name again?
William Gornto, Gornto.
Can you tell me the area you're from and the neighborhood you're from?
I'm Geneva Woods, St. Gothard Avenue,
Woods?
yes.
And how is this homeless not being contained in your area? Because what we're looking at is we have a downtown district.
Right.
And Mr. Constant's been trying to figure out a plan,
Right.
and I think he has something coming forward. I'm
Right.
going to work with Mr. Constant, hopefully, to.
So I'm very,
But I mean,
I'm empathetic towards what has occurred in downtown and
Correct.
Fairview with greater impact than the other parts of the town. It is already proliferating to other parts of the city. And the right solution is to solve the issue, not to simply move it around like a ping pong ball. There is another proposal out there that has been put on the table by Nick Begich and Dave Cuddy. It's called Intervention 2020. And it involves all the constituents around the state, all the stakeholders, and I've heard from some Assembly members that the state doesn't want to do anything. Well, very specifically, those sponsors met with the governor, and the governor does want to do something and is forming a committee to consider that. I also heard from Assembly members that there are flaws in that plan, there's some unconstitutional things, et cetera, but it has a lot of merit, and it has a lot of merit that needs consideration. And it recognizes that the homeless situation in Anchorage is not an Anchorage problem, it's a statewide problem, and it needs a statewide solution. And you heard from others that getting people away from the temptations, away from the attractors, away from the triggers, is a way that other locations, other states have had positive results. That's the type of solution we should be seeking here.
and can I ask you, what is your expertise as far as the other gentleman said he does cost analysis? We had someone else who's a real estate agent. What could you bring as your thoughts and you're part of our community?
Well, I've worked in corporate offices for 30 years. I've worked for a native corporation in the corporate office. My specialty is risk finance, risk management. I do cost analysis for decisions all day long. And I can transfer that knowledge to any sort of cost analysis for whatever type of impacts of different proposals are being considered.
Okay, thank you, sir, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Bill Borchardt, that's spelled B-O-R-C-H-A-R-D-T, and I'm here to speak to both 66 and 58. Kind of an incredible experience tonight. I'm opposed to both of them, of course, but does it register with you people that there are two different groups in the room here? There are approximately 700 people that think this is a really bad idea, and there are you 11 people, or maybe less, that think it's a good idea. And we have to come here tonight on a beautiful summer night and stay here till 12 o'clock, and the rumor is that you still might vote it down. I can't believe that you guys who represent, theoretically, people would be so obtuse. Do you think that all the 700 people who've come here tonight are stupid? Why can't we turn both of these down and go home? Because they're a really bad idea. But let me give you two examples, okay? The first example is the people here from the Midtown area are kind of fighting for their neighborhoods. Now, none of you live or have business or probably have anything to do with Midtown except Mr. Rivera and Ms. Zantel. You theoretically represent them, but the rest of us either have businesses there or we live there. Putting two homeless camps into private businesses is just beyond belief that you would even do that. And I'm not unsympathetic to the homeless people, but what you're doing is really not working and is never going to work. Trying to make this area of Midtown into a homeless area, we see what it looks like down on 3rd Avenue, and that's really not what we want to have. Second thing is costs. I want to say this nicely, but you guys are kind of on the chump train when it comes to valuing these properties. I mean, nobody in their right mind would pay this much money for those properties that you've decided to buy. I mean, it's incredible. To make it even worse, after you buy the properties, it's going to cost you probably double or maybe more to remodel them to be of any use to you. And it's probably going to take, I don't know, years. The gym is an example there on Tudor Road. That's supposed to be an 80 bed facility, a 60 bed facility, 120, I don't know. But it's just a gym. It's a giant concrete structure with no plumbing, no bathrooms, no anything. The cost to remodel that is probably double or triple what you're going to pay for it. So who is going to be responsible? I'd like to know this. When $22,500,000 doesn't do everything you want it to do, when the cost to buy and remodel these buildings turns out to be $32,500,000, who picks up the tab for that? Hopefully, everybody will be, I mean, you guys have rivers of money, I realize, but it's still, you should do competent things. So going back to 2020-58, obviously my reasoning would be the same for that. I would not to be disrespectful here, but I wouldn't trust you guys to put homeless centers into any B3 area that you want. It could be politically motivated, it could be financially motivated, definitely not a good idea. So what I would suggest is you guys end this misery for everybody, vote those two things down. Do you realize that you guys are the only ones that like this? There's not one person in this building, there's not one person of the 400, 500, 600 people who are outside who think this is a good idea. Not one. Except maybe Mr. Berkowitz. So anyway, that's my two bits. Do you have any questions?
I do have one question for you, Ms.
Yes.
Allard.
Do you have businesses, and did you say you lived in Midtown?
I don't live in Midtown, but I have some property in Midtown. I'm a little bit familiar with real estate values because I've bought property
Have
there.
your properties or your businesses been impacted with the
Oh,
movement?
yeah, we have enough problems as it is
Can you
with the
tell me a little bit
existing
about
homeless.
that?
Well, you know, they have a 007 license to, you know, throw up on my front porch or steal my kid's bike or do just about anything. So many of the homeless are really not homeless, they're just vagrants. Some of them are homeless and probably need to be helped. Some of them are just vandals and vagrants. So yeah, I spend $40,000 a year on extra security because the police, of course, don't have the time to watch things.
So it's financially impacted your businesses?
Yeah, and it's really going to impact my business. I own a mall across from the gym, and you know, nobody's going to want to be in those areas. It's just not. You look at 3rd Avenue, you look at all of those things, it's just a miserable experience.
What would you suggest us do?
Oh, well, first of all, look at homeless situations that are working in some places. For instance, if Seattle isn't working, Portland isn't working, San Francisco isn't working, and that's what you guys are doing. So why don't you go and study maybe Salt Lake City? Salt Lake City is reputed to be working. They have a facility out of town. They don't allow vagrants, as I've heard, and they bus them out of town and they give them their services away from people, not in the middle of town. So, for instance, in one of the buildings is right 1 block away from a liquor superstore. So, really, how smart is that? So, anyway.
Based on your study, have you ever been to Salt Lake City?
Yes, I have.
And it's a pretty big city, isn't it?
It's 1.8 million people in the metropolitan area.
And how many people do you think we have in Anchorage?
300,000.
So would you say that the overall square miles of Anchorage is quite a bit different than Salt Lake City?
Probably bigger. I think Anchorage is a huge city, geographic-wise. I think it goes all the way up to...
Just give it to me. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Sir.
Mr. Constant.
Yeah, thank you. Would it surprise you, sir?
Oh,
Would it
yes.
surprise you to learn that Salt Lake City 4 years ago purchased 4 buildings around their middle ring around their downtown, not within their downtown, but like within a mile or 2 miles of their downtown? They bought 4 buildings and broke down their 1,000-bed unit and made 4 200-bed. Would that surprise you?
Well, I haven't studied it. It's not really not my job to do that.
Right. I would recommend to everybody, look what Salt Lake City did. It's amazing, and it's very similar to what's being proposed here.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Ms. Allard.
Sir, do you think, though, from your experience and what you guys have read about Salt Lake City?
Pardon me?
Hold on, Ms. Allard.
Are
So,
you done?
hold on. So, if we continue with this back and forth and booing, I'm going to end this meeting. We cannot have this type of decorum in this meeting, okay? So we're going to keep going. And Ms. Allard.
From what you've read or any interest in Salt Lake City, do you think, I'm just asking, do you think that they had a plan and maybe a way to implement that plan and then a way to execute that plan?
You know, I'm not
unlike
really
us?
an expert. I'm probably an expert on human behavior, but I'm not an expert on homeless handles. I'm sure they did have a plan, and I'm sure there are places that are successful with the homeless, and I'm equally sure they're not putting them in Midtown next to bars and liquor stores. I'm pretty sure that's not happening.
Fair enough. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Salatel.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we have any intention to intersperse the in-person testimony with those who are waiting for phone? Because I do know that some people have asked to testify by phone as an accommodation for not being able to be here tonight. So I just wanted to raise that as an issue for you to think about. Thank you.
Thank you for the reminder. Yeah, if we do not get through phone testimony today, whether interspersed, we'll do that in a future meeting. But thank you for that reminder. Welcome.
I'll start right out by violating a rule. My name is Rosalie Nadeau. I don't have a job, I'm retired. But I spent 25 years being the director, CEO of Aquila. It isn't just Aquila House, it is a lot more.
Sorry to interrupt. Are you testifying on one or both items?
Both.
Thank you.
One of the things that I had to do, I went there in '92, and we had one building. When I started, there were 60 people in that building. Today, due to funding cuts, et cetera, there are 16 people treated in that same building. That's the old Aquila House building. What we have done in addition to that, and I have some experience with residential programming. We have another residential program in Anchorage. In addition to that one, then I had one in Ketchikan. Have halfway houses, not halfway houses, transitional houses in 3 different communities or neighborhoods in this. One of the gentlemen who talked about living in Heather Mesa, he probably doesn't even know that one of Aquila's transitional housing units is in Heather Meadows, which I take as testimony to the fact that we run the things so that crime doesn't happen. In the 25 years I was there, there was never one time that the police ever came to us and said, we're after Joey Jones, he just did that or he did that. That never happened. We never had a single report of any kind of crime happen by the people who were in treatment. Now, my concern, I did lots of zoning things when I'm setting up 2 residential programs, and because we did some changes at Aquila, it took additional zoning issues. The new one, it's not new anymore, but the newer one also took zoning issues. You fought through those. The transitional housing units in 3 different areas in the state, there was a reason I did that, because I felt it was important to make their transitional living appear as normal as possible. And having a little apartment in which you and a roommate, or sometimes 2 if it were a 3-bedroom place, lived was much more normal than having a big congregate place, because immediately neighborhoods get frightened by the view of that. Now, I think neighborhoods have a right to be concerned until the plans for how they will be run materialize. When I just hear a flop house, which is what the testimony here has sounded like. Now, I don't believe that's what's planned, but because there is not a great deal of planning out there for the public to look at, I think that to save yourself heartaches and to make the community more comfortable, regardless of where you buy the property, you'll run into zoning issues, you just will. But regardless of where it is, what you need to do is have a plan for how you're going to get people in there, assess them. Great deal of mental illness happens in the homeless community. At Aquila House, about 93% of our population was duly diagnosed. And in terms of problems, drugs versus alcohol, count me as somebody who sees alcohol as a much greater problem. I can deal with detoxing somebody who is on a drug. I don't care what that drug is. If I tried to do that with somebody who's alcoholic, he's going to die on me. We have one detox place in this city, one. And we used to have more, but we don't. And so we have to get people into detox, which means you're going to wait before you can bring them into your treatment program. The same thing will happen with wherever you're looking at doing or what you're looking at doing. But don't plan just a place to house homeless people who can then wander off and do whatever they want during the day. That just is not going to work for them. It's not going to work for neighborhoods. So have a management plan in place so that people can look at that management plan. Doesn't mean they're going to like it. You're going to have people who are afraid of that population, and they're not going to like any management plan. That's just the reality. Every one of us would love to see homeless people just go away. I just read something, I think today, it may have been yesterday, that says 40% of the homeless population is Alaska Native or Indian. And the population in Anchorage of that particular group is 13%. So of that homeless group that don't have a residency here, you have that kind of thing. My recommendation is that the Assembly contact the Native organizations and ask them what kind of help they can provide. Because they've got half of the problem or close to it. Now, I can tell you that villages will ban somebody who is creating a problem in the village, primarily because of their drinking or drug use.
Your time is up, but I have a question for you. Ms. Allard.
And they ship them in.
So when you obviously have very well knowledge, more than I could have possibly have with the management of, you manage rehab facilities is what you're saying? Did I understand you correctly? So when you guys, let's say we're working at it, right? So we got these buildings and we're trying to implement so we can have a rehab. How long does it take to put something like that together? And do you think we're putting the cart before the horse? Should we try to implement, try to get a plan together, lay everything out, and then move? Like, I just want to know your expertise.
I would say get your building.
Okay.
Because you can't plan without knowing where that plan's going to go.
So is the building location something that you would find a good location?
I don't see it as a bad location. This is a population that is a population that's going to wander off if allowed to and create the same kind of mess they were in before. They just are. So you have to have a building that provides some recreational area. It doesn't have to be a lot, but a big meeting room where you can pull people together and talk, and they can talk to one another. If you're going to have homeless men and women, you have to have a way of separating who is where. And there are a lot of things that go with it. And frankly, I would be willing to, since I'm not working anymore, I would be willing to assist with that kind of thing. But I can tell you, you can't put this population in a building with you can't just kick them out because they're bad, because that's where they want. It wouldn't take very long for a lot of them to figure out, okay, I can sleep here, but if I misbehave, they're just going to kick me out the door. So you have to have plans that are broader than that. You have to have an idea. And I will guarantee that at least half, if not more, of those homeless people you have an addiction problem. And by the way, it is defined as an illness by all the medical professionals around. And they have a mental health issue. This state has absolutely abysmal mental health positions. And I've been 25 years there, but I also was the founding director of Clare House, which is a homeless shelter for women with children. So since 1982, that's when I was hired, and we opened the doors the first month of '83, I've been involved in working in programs for homeless people and/or people who are both homeless and have addiction problems, as well as mental health problems.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. All right, so at this point, what I'm going to do to allow folks who have signed up to testify over the phone, I am going to do 3 people over the phone, 3 people in person, and that should get us through a good chunk of this list for folks over the phone. So let's go ahead and start with Mr. Kevin Tritt.
Hello, it's Kevin.
Hi, Mr. Tritt. This is Felix Rivera. You're here with the Anchorage Assembly. We now have before us for public hearing items 2020-58 and 2020-66. Would you like to testify on one or both of those items?
Comment on both, please.
Okay, you have 6 minutes. Welcome. Go ahead, sir. Sir, are you still with us?
Am I on?
Yes, we can hear you. So go ahead, sir. You have 6 minutes.
I got to get away from the audio feed as well. So sorry about the technical difficulties.
Okay.
All right. I have like to say that this evening that I'm representing myself and my family, my wife Robin Levine, her father Norman, and our children. We recently moved into a college village because it is a wonderful neighborhood. They can't hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Sorry, my daughter's commenting on the feed, which is delayed.
Yeah, sir, so it is delayed. So if you want to go ahead and just turn off the other feed,
I understand.
that will help.
So, College Village is a really wonderful neighborhood. However, we're less than a half a mile from the proposed rehab facility at the Golden Lion. We've also been immediately impacted by the recently abated encampment at Jacobson Park at 36th and McInnes. It's not like 200 yards from our house. And I strongly support my neighbors' desires to maintain and protect the qualities of our neighborhood that we ourselves have come to love. But our family's values do not allow us to stand in the way of a much needed and frankly potentially good idea simply because we imagine that it may raise other issues that may need to be addressed. We are frustrated by the frequent opposition raised to our community's attempts to address the incredibly challenging issue of homelessness and economic disparity. The homeless are often directly blamed for the vagrancy, crime, alcohol, and drug issues in our community rather than viewed as the tragic and comorbid consequences of a failed system that we are socially and morally obligated to address. Considering that we recently bought our home and plan on staying here for a very long time, the thought that property values and corresponding taxes might actually go down in the short term in exchange for addressing some of the huge and historically unaddressed maladies of our broader community does not dissuade us. In fact, it might be considered a fair exchange. If done right, the impact to our neighborhood can be minimal. We appreciate and understand that those who are closest will likely have the greatest concerns, and other neighborhoods may differ. However, we also believe that if the municipality wishes to alter the public's opportunities for input, then they should anticipate likely concerns and provide a specific way to address those concerns. As such, we request that from the Assembly, that this ordinance be amended or some formal mechanism be provided that ensures that both a process and funding is implemented to anticipate and mitigate those potential impacts. We believe that we all need to look at the big picture and address these long overdue issues as we can and as a community. Now, that was my prepared comments, and I think I have a few minutes left. One of the things that I wanted to comment after listening to testimony tonight was that it seems like there's frequently these references to all of the horrible impacts that currently exist and have been getting worse within our community related to this issue of homelessness. And it's really complicated because you do not have a single source. It is, like I said, this comorbid consequence because we're not addressing the broader issues. But from the arguments that I've heard, I keep hearing that we don't want to do anything because that will make it worse. And it just doesn't make sense to me. I think it's time for us to take some action, yet I totally agree with the people who have said this process does not seem transparent and that it does not seem like it will address the immediate issues. I want to trust that my government is going to do something that is thoughtful and deliberative and that serves all of our interests, but transparency is required for that. And at the same time, I recognize that we have an urgency. We may have funding available. I don't even know the details. I haven't heard the details of how this is supposed to work or why it's supposed to work the way it's being proposed. I think that's a failure of communication, and a major one at that. So I would like to hear some of those answers in the immediate future. I suspect that this issue will go on further because there is more public comment to be taken. And I encourage the Assembly to figure out a way to make that communication clear to the public so that we can better get behind and support actions that are going to be proactive, moving forward, and addressing the homeless situation. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Miss Natalie Nelson.
Hello?
Hi, Ms. Nelson. This is Felix Rivera. You are here with the Anchorage Assembly. We are at public testimony for items AO 2020-58 and 66. Do you plan on testifying on one or both of those items?
Okay, am I on? My name is Natalia Nelson, and I live in College Village. And I appreciate the comment of the previous neighbor. And I do feel for homeless people as well. And listening to your sessions very attentively, would like to compliment Ms. Allard for your thoughtfulness and curiosity and willingness to listen. Actually, looking through some Utah experience they just mentioned, Reuters reported this year in January one national model Utah struggles with homelessness. So I would like our respected Assembly members to look into it more closely. I'm here to take all my 6 minutes, and like majority of my neighbors, I'm opposing on the solution. On a short-term solution. I'm not opposing on a long-term, thoughtful process that we all have to go through and figure out how to solve it. Like I mentioned, I live in College Village, and I submitted with my testimony the map. I would like to include it in public record. It's a simple map showing the proximity of schools and like you know, a picture worth 1,000 words. So I would like actually members to get familiar with this map and not just do the talk, but walk the walk. You can actually walk from the circle and just walk through our neighborhood and see how close it is. Not just to preschool and Catholic and Jewish museum, but also major Rogers Park Elementary School. And I see kids walking in the neighborhood in the morning and in the afternoon, not anymore with pandemic, but when I used to drive to work, I see them all the time, kids walking alone. in the neighborhood to the school, and just putting these facilities in such a close proximity, we just taking one issue and creating it even worse. We haven't, and I don't want to repeat others, but it has been studied. The response was inadequate. I'm actually pulled by members and the city governing body that I, elected, because it's just, we are not even considered. And I would like you also to include in my testimony the record from nextdoor.com. Our neighborhood did a poll on who's opposing and who's against. And over 700 people voted, and close to 70% voted in opposition. Just in College Village and like Rogers Park, Geneva Woods communities. I emailed this poll to include in the record as well. So,
Ma'am, your time is up, but I have a question for you from Ms. Allard.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Can you please tell me what it is again?
Can you please, can you please speak closer to the microphone, or maybe to the feed that goes to the phone?
Could you repeat your name to me again, please?
Can you please repeat?
Did she say her name?
No, but it's Natalie Nelson.
Okay, thank you. Natalie, how long have you lived in your neighborhood? And how has it impacted you and your family?
Well, like everyone's mentioned, we've seen an increase in activity. People on the, like, and I don't have any prejudice, but when you see a biker with a backpack, when you see a walker with a backpack crossing from the green belt, coming through the neighborhood, it's a homeless person or maybe just some trouble coming in. And I walk my daughter to school as well. I mean, she goes to Rogers Park, so I kind of teach her like, okay, you have to be careful, you don't have to. And actually, Miss Allard, she mentioned that she carries gun, and kids do not carry guns. And what it takes just one incident, and people mentioning like needles on the ground. I mean, we are looking into some potential lawsuits here, not just needles on the ground. You think that putting people next to a liquor stores in the middle of Midtown, it will not tempt them to venture out within like 10 minutes, passing school to Fred Meyer's and meet some kids on the street as they walk to the school or from the school. I mean, this is just big problem waiting to happen, and I just don't appreciate the lack of thoughtfulness. And you already heard about public trust issue, and I do hope that you will restore it by killing both of them, those ordinances, and they will be more confident in our leadership. We'll have to elect some other officials, because, I mean, this is just not adequate. By the way, I got 2 emails
Ms.
from...
Nelson, thank you so much for your testimony and for participating today. I'm going to move on to the next testifier. And so next we have Ms. Corrine O'Neill.
You've reached Corinne O'Neill.
Okay, so that is our first 3 on phone testimony. We'll go ahead and go back to in person. Welcome.
Hi. First of all, I want to thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Rivera. I also want to thank Mr. Constant. Because he has given us more information in his one outburst than the entire two ordinances have in total. So, gee, maybe you should have done that before all this started. My name is Scott Anderson. I've been in Anchorage for over 40 years.
And sorry, you're testifying on one or both?
I am testifying on both.
Thank you.
On 58, it's interesting, I read it, and nobody's talked about the actual language of this, or not much. Lines 20 through 22 say that the Sullivan the replacement need is immediate and warrants expedited actions. But, oh, I'm sorry, he's gone. Under our own mayor's emergency actions, we can't congregate in mass. The Sullivan can't be used for the functions which it is supposed to. So why can't we use it as housing? The other part that's really interesting is that it talks about Title 21, and it should go to the Planning and Zoning Committee. But because PLI is not available, it is, but because it's not available according to this, and Title 21 would take so long, evidently, it's not specifically called out, but evidently would take so long to change existing zoning to PLI, we just have to do something else. The other thing it says about PLI is that it's subject to a conditional use permit. So you go to the second page of 58, and Section 2 says, notwithstanding anything else that the government did in Title 21, including the rewrites, this ordinance shall not require review from the Planning and Zoning Commission, and not a word about a conditional use permit. So, we talked to our assembly people. One of my assembly people is Meg Zalatel. She said in an email that there may be, this was a Midtown Community Council meeting. She said that there may be conditional use permit required. We don't know. We're not going to plan that. That's crazy. Title 21 says there should be. Why can't you guys abide by your own rules? Why do the rest of us have to, but you don't? Nobody's dying. How many COVID cases are there in the homeless population? 0. There are 0 cases of COVID. So, you want to take zoning that exists, that has been rewritten, that has been relatively effective for the city, and you want to flush it down the toilet. You say that other places do it. Other places have zoning that encourages multi-use like this. Mr. Weddleton says that Boston's Pine Street has $1 million condos going up next to a 500-person homeless shelter. That's great. But you haven't proven to us that you can do that. Where are there $1 million condos in Anchorage going up? Does anybody know? Downtown, on railroad land. Mr. Constant doesn't want them down there. Understandably, absolutely. Your constituents don't want them down there. Your businesses don't want them down there. But if you don't have a plan and you can't prove to the rest of the population of Anchorage, the nearly 300,000 people that you're going to affect, why should we believe you? Why should we believe that you can make this work when you haven't for 30 years? Meg also mentions in a meeting that Felix was at also, and John Weddleton, at the Midtown Community Council, that all commercial or residential developments have a well-established process which includes the requirement for a formal presentation to all community councils. It includes conditional use permits. You're bypassing all of that. Nobody said why you have to bypass that except that it's an emergency. It's not an emergency. You had these plans in play for over a year, and you've been trying to figure out a time when you can slip it past everybody. And if you don't think that's what everybody else in Anchorage thinks, you're not listening. Do we have to treat homelessness? Do we have to treat addiction? Or, as Meg says, substance misuse. I'm not sure how you correctly use heroin. I'm not sure how you correctly use meth. I'm not sure how you correctly use spice. But let's say substance misuse. We have to treat that. That's absolutely true. We have to give them a realistic chance for recovery. Shoving zoning changes through in essentially the dead of summer when no one knew about it until less than 3 weeks ago, or about 3 weeks ago, is really slimy. And everybody that's involved is going to be running for office. I'm assuming, Mr. Mayor, I'm assuming, Mr. Chair, that you're going to be running for further office. Everybody's going to remember what happens with these two ordinances. Everybody here is, the hundreds of people outside are, the people watching are, and you know what? You've enraged people so that they're going to be involved in the future. As far as 66, again, this is an emergency. We have to buy these buildings because it's an emergency. Except that, again, back to the Midtown Community Council, it's funny how these things pop back up. This was discussed a year ago to purchase the old Alaska Club building. This isn't an emergency. You waited until you found a time when you could get it past us, when you didn't think we were watching, when you didn't think we were listening.
Thank you,
when
sir.
you didn't think we would come out and
Your time
talk
is
to
up,
you.
but I have a question for you. Ms. Allard?
Hi, Mr. Anderson. So I actually have a couple questions for you. You said that from what we know, and we had somebody up here that's an expert and runs some of the facilities and said that she isn't aware of any homeless having any sort of COVID. So she told us there were 0 cases. So in your opinion, would you constitute that we have an emergency with our homeless that would make us want to have to purchase these properties?
Well, 0 cases, 0 deaths. That doesn't sound like an emergency. It also doesn't sound like there's a housing emergency. If the Sullivan can't be used, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, you wrote the rules, the emergency rules, that say we can't congregate in large groups. We have to social distance here. We have to use masks. Yet the people that don't do that have 0 COVID cases. They're housed fully in the Sullivan Arena. Ben Boki was closed because of sex, drug use, alcohol, and damage, from what I've heard. Why is none of this exposed? Why is none of this talked about?
Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Dana McAlpine, and I live in College Village, and I was not going to be the one speaking here tonight. My husband, Stephen, was supposed to be here,
Sorry
but
to
he
interrupt.
couldn't get in.
Are you testifying on one or both today?
I don't know, because I'm just going to talk about how I feel.
Okay.
And the first thing is, I have an observation to make. You had all these people here that wanted to speak on one issue. I don't understand why you didn't take the public input on this issue instead of all the other things that you put in front of this. We've all waited to speak, and I would have thought that you would have done that one first. I want to know, can you guarantee me, I live in College Village, I've lived there since 1991. I moved there because of the schools, the families, the participation that people have in that community. Can you guarantee me if the Golden Lion / Best Western is turned into a treatment facility, it will not look like most of the Anchorage corners in Midtown? Mr. Constant talked about Salt Lake City and that they have put around, not in town, but around, and that it has worked. That's not what you're trying to do here. You're trying to put it in the middle of town. The other comment I want to make is that the first lady who spoke up here tonight talked about putting the facility on the old hospital property. And Mr. Constant sat up there and shook his head, not in my subdivision, not in my area. That's how we feel in College Village. There are elementary schools, there are daycare centers, there are tons of families with small children, and we don't want that in our neighborhood either. And that may be calling me a NIMBY. I'm sorry, but that's how I feel.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome.
I brought a few notes, just kidding. My name is Dave Morgan. I live on Stanford. I'll give you the exact address if you want it. I'm speaking on both issues. And I'd appreciate if I can't see that far because I work trifocals, so if you could just raise your hand when I'm down to my last minute, I'll stop immediately, just like my old debate coach in college used to do. I'm basically, my background is I have an undergraduate degree in economics and accounting and a graduate degree in health economics. I worked 14 years for South Central as a reimbursement director and also in their financial planning, 5 years at Providence Hospital as their patient accounts director and ops, and 4.5 years for Eastern Aleutian Tribes, running their 5 clinics, including behavioral health, mental health, processing, and case managers reported to me in King Cove, Sandpoint, Akutan, Coal Bay, and then we picked up the contract for Whittier when the road was completed. I'm a fellow of the Healthcare Financial Managers Association, which you don't buy, you have to take a test and have 10 years in executive, and also a fellow of the American Society of Health Economists and sit on the regional board. That's what that report's for. I report all of our virus stats, 19 of them, to the regional, then goes into the national. I thought I'd get that out of the way before we started the cross-ex of who are you and how can you talk about this stuff. What I'd like to talk about is not an issue of who's walking around or security issues, but more about the process on zoning and going through that which you've heard a lot, so I'll shorten and take a little different tact. But also talk about externalities, and then go into the situation on how South Central and how Providence System does projects like this, whether it's a surgery center, a mental health facility, or a hospital. Working with government, and I'm sure everybody in this room has worked with both those organizations one way or another. Oh, by the way, I was your chairman of your health commission under Mayor Sullivan on for 3 and chairman for 3, and I represented primary care and mental health on the state health commission and human services for 6 years before it was defunded by Governor Walker. Any questions? Good. I also have a certificate in analytics if we want to do some math here later on. As a resident and a citizen of Anchorage since 1985 when I was recruited by Providence, so I know the community, but I also know healthcare, but I also know how to plan it. I know how to operate it, organize it, and more important, make money with it. South Central went from 10 years before I joined it, a $10 million operation to a $500 million operation. So there are ways to do this where you make money and break even, at least as a nonprofit. You've done everything backwards, basically. I'm looking at this analytically because I know some of you, but sometimes you make rash decisions and those are not helpful. When you're trying to fix a problem, which is really a statewide problem, and we're catching it. Now, as President Gottlieb would say you can either stand around and boo-hoo, or you can use the process and work the process to fix the problem. To me, it's not about where this stuff is. By the way, I've been to Utah, and where those facilities are not in necessarily residential neighborhoods per se, but they're more in areas that you don't have a lot of high impact housing. But that's for another day. I'll send the study doing the evaluation to you. As you can see, I really like graphs. I've got 1 minute. So basically, you need to work with, and it's been mentioned, up the street from where you want to do it, you have the Alaska Native Trust Health Authority. They have a hospital. They have an outpatient. They have all the facilities. You have South Central that also works with a detox and gets $6 million a year from HHS, who will take anybody if you're referred to by a doc. You have Providence Hospital Medical Center that has ER, hospital. You have the Anchorage Community Mental Health Services located on Folker Street, and then you have the Alaska Psychiatric Institute with an acre of land that's not being used, all within a square mile with bus transportation for outpatient and to deal with those processes. Most of your 50% end up there if they're drug alcohol.
Thank you. I have a question for you.
So basically, I would call them in.
Sorry,
Mr. Morgan,
your time is up, but I have a question for you. Ms.
Okay.
Allard.
Mr. Morgan, so in federal world, I don't know what we call it in civilian world, but we call it a SME. So we would call you a subject matter expert.
I think in this room right now, unless your director of health is here, who's a doctor maybe, yes.
So
We have one that's going to testify from our group here in a minute. You can ask him, but go ahead.
So you've worked with the mentally ill, you've worked with the homeless, have you worked with drug addiction and alcohol addiction?
Yes, and I've also had to work with employees that had, healthcare has a high, there's a camera. Healthcare has the highest impact of people who, because they have access, use drugs. And I've had to deal with employees as an executive who have got themselves addicted. I'm talking about docs, basically.
If there is one piece of advice you could give the Assembly on something you find that would really impact and help our homeless today,
right,
to better the situation we have going in Anchorage, what would that be? I know you have many, just you want
3 things.
Go ahead.
The first thing I would do is, before I bought buildings and before I did all that, and maybe you will buy them, I don't know, but I would get with the Alaska Mental Health Trust, who have expertise in this. And they also have almost $700 million in assets. I would get with the Alaska Behavioral Health Association, and then there's other organizations, the Municipality of Anchorage Homeless Committee, put them together, go up Providence, sit down, and work on a continuum care so you can fix it. To warehouse and do the same thing again is also a definition of mental health because it's failed. Let's try to do something, since we got evidently $22 million, to actually fix the problem. And you have lots of people up there that are smarter than me.
So you said you worked with the state? You worked at the state level, sir?
If you, while I was appointed and ran their state health commission, but anybody in healthcare on a significant amount works with the state because of Medicaid reimbursement, the feds on Medicare reimbursement, the VA, and also rate control and cost reports. So whether you can call it working with them, they every year know everything that's going on. And if you work in a community health center, you have to show them your costs and your rates. You have a payer system so you can compare out of our 250 facilities in community health or our 18 programs. And Anchorage Neighborhood Health has an excellent program.
So as a subject matter expert, would you recommend that possibly with the Intervention 2020, I don't know if you've read it, but if the state has some ideas and some found that maybe we could integrate the state,
I would
even if we don't
invite
agree
them
with it
to
all?
that meeting with your health people and sit down and work this out. Are these buildings, I've been in 2 of them. From what little knowledge I have in talking to realtors, it's going to be a huge cost to retrofit. I'm more inclined to go up 2 miles and put them where they don't even have to drive to get these. There's a detox center there that gets $6 million a year from Health and Human Services Federal, that then when they discharged out of the detox, alcohol and drug, they send them to the Ernie Turner facility out in the Clutna to go through the 60, 90-day process there, just like the young lady who has gone through this personally. And I've heard countless stories like that. This is not something you can fix with 4 buildings. It's something you have to fix with a program, people, money. You heard the person say a lot of stuff's not here anymore because there isn't any more money. So there's few, as the sister told me at Providence, there's not much money, but we're going to make it work. And she was, as we say in the bluegrass, she was so sharp she could write through a screen door with a pencil. So I'm just telling you, don't make the same mistake. To me, it's not about these other problems you're hearing. Property values, people wandering around, that is probably a problem.
Thank you,
I'm
Mr.
looking
Morgan.
at the system to get this fixed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your
Anything
testimony.
else? No more questions? Good.
Okay, so we have 5 minutes left in our meeting tonight. So I want to thank everyone who came out to testify.
Move to extend.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
And do you have a specific time?
Midnight. That's our legal maximum, folks.
Okay, so is there any discussion on that? Okay, seeing no discussion, and just as a reminder to the body, Ms. Zalatel?
Thank you. Even if we extend to midnight, we won't get through all of the public comment on this. So I just wanted to point that out, because I mean, you can always double check my math, but we have a bunch on the phone. And so even if you're here and we try to move through the public comment, it doesn't mean we'll get to you. Just want to be really clear about that.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton?
And as far as that goes, I checked with the attorney for the 2 marijuana licenses at the end, and she understands if we can't get to that this evening.
Thank you. Ms. Allard?
Can you just explain to me a little bit of the process? So if we go ahead and, let's say we adjourn tonight at 11.
Mm-hmm.
It's late, everybody here wants to testify. Is it unable for any of them to testify at a later date? Or
Yeah,
can you,
so basically what will happen is,
unless you call a meeting tomorrow and we vote, and then they're not going to be able to come out and say what they want?
so what will happen is tomorrow there will be a special meeting at 5 p.m. Continued, excuse me, yes, a continued meeting at 5 p.m. For us to finish up both these 2 items and the testimony, if we actually get through testimony, and all the remainder of the items, some of which are timely and cannot wait until July 28th. So the motion we have before us is to whether to extend to midnight. As Ms. Zalatel has stated, we're not going to get through everyone. So if we decide to extend to midnight, we'll get through as many as we can, and then we'll be back here tomorrow to do this again.
So technically, they can all come back tomorrow at 5 o'clock and testify again? Or testify for the first time?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Okay.
And I guess just to be super clear, so the intent is, before we're done tonight, depending on if we go to midnight or not, to change the order of the day for us to take up all of the other items that are not these two items, and take those up at the 5 to 6 hour, and then at 6 o'clock is when we will start the testimony on these two items again. Because those other items do need to get done, and I don't want to keep delaying them. So with that, we're going to go ahead and take the vote on whether to extend to midnight. And just as a reminder, this is a vote that does require a supermajority, so 8 votes in favor. Yes. How she wants.
Mr. Dunbar.
Are you waiting for anyone else?
Okay, here we go. Yeah.
So that motion fails 6-4. So we are going to end our meeting at, in a minute. So can I go ahead and get a motion to change the order of the day to take up items 14A and 14B after whatever our last item is, after 15C?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any opposition to that? Okay, seeing none, then we're going to...
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, can I just ask a question
Sure.
about the schedule for tomorrow? So you said that we wouldn't start public testimony on those items until 6, but it could be earlier if we zipped through the others, right? You were just giving an estimated time. You were letting people know we were starting with other items first.
Yes, so we are starting with other items at 5 o'clock, starting with 14C all the way through 15C. And then after all of those items are completed, which I estimate to take roughly an hour, then we'll get to 14A and B.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
come back tomorrow night.
Yes. All right, with,
So we have a vote to change the order of the day.
oh, do we need a motion to continue?
Is that-
Can I get a motion to continue the meeting to tomorrow?
Move to continue.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any opposition? Seeing none, then this meeting is continued until tomorrow.